Xianxia lies broken and silent, but the Star God Emperor's final sword blow is still to come. Jasmine's cold power is shredding the very heavens. Leave a like and subscribe to witness the reckoning. Demise, the sea of lightning faded, but for some reason the raging blood in the crowd's veins and their shivering hearts wouldn't calm down no matter what. They felt like their very hair, their very cells had fallen into the abyss of terror, and it was a kind of fear they had never experienced even in their worst nightmares. As the lightning slowly faded, the world eventually turned completely silent. Even the blood, stench, and killing intent that were originally in the air had been mostly devoured by the sea of lightning. A blood-drenched Xianxia lay on the ground, silent and still. The heaven-smiting sword that had conjured countless nightmares was lying soundlessly beside him. This time, his aura wasn't the only thing that had become thin. His very existence had become so weak that it was nearly impossible to detect. Not one star guard made an attempt to approach him amidst the terrible silence, however. No one had even dared to take a step forward. Thanks to the nightmares Xianxia had conjured one after another, the star guards had completely devolved into frightened birds. They were afraid that this was just a temporary respite of the demon god, that he would awaken and drag them to the abyss of death the moment they got closer to him. Finally, it's over. Tumi, the heavenly origin star god, closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. It was only after he had calmed down a little that he realized that both his white hair and beard were dripping with cold sweat. He was a divine master, so of course he was aware that the purple sea of lightning that seemed capable of destroying heaven and earth was Xianxia's final strength. This time, Xianxia truly had exhausted everything he had. The star god emperor's face was twitching terribly. His hands were curled into a death grip. Both his life and soul aura had become incredibly weak at the same time. It would appear that his unnatural power came at the price of his own life and his soul. The profound veins are the first things that are damaged when a body bears a power beyond its limit, so it is very likely that his profound veins are now completely destroyed. It will be pointless to spare him even if you want to, my king, the heavenly origin star god said slowly. End him now, the star god emperor uttered in a low tone. If he had wanted to capture Xianxia with all his heart before, then now he wanted to see him dead just as much. Thankfully, the ritual was just beginning when this incident happened. In the end, this changes nothing, the heavenly origin star god said. Had this distraction happened while the ritual was progressing to the critical part where a star god's power was extracted and fused, things would probably have ended in absolute disaster. Wipe him out, the heavenly origin star god ordered. He is completely powerless and he may very well be dead already. Destroy his body and leave no traces behind. Yes, the star guards answered in unison, but a breath passed, 2 breaths passed, 3 breaths passed, and still no star guard stepped forward to execute the command. All they did was to exchange a fearful glance with each other. It was unbelievably embarrassing. Allow me. Just when the star god emperor was about to explode in fury, a figure finally stepped forward and jumped into the air. It was the Heavenly Strength Star Guard commander. As a commander of the Star Guards, it was his duty to take the lead on all matters no matter how reluctant he felt. The commander had a bruise on his body, a wound Xianxia had left behind during his retaliatory sword strike. The commander was a level 9 divine sovereign, and his gaze looked cold and determined. However, there was clearly something fleeting far behind his pupils. He had barely closed the distance between him and Xianxia before he came to a stop. It was as if that was as far as his remaining courage would allow. Then, he summoned a ball of profound energy in an attempt to fire it at Xianxia from afar. Profound light was just gathering in the commander's hand when suddenly, Xianxia's remaining arm twitched before his eyes. It was just an incredibly light shiver, but it had scared the commander of the Heavenly Strength Star Guard so much that he nearly had a breakdown right there. He flew back in what was almost the fastest speed of his life, and stopped only when he was even further away from Xianxia than he originally was. The profound light in his hand had also completely crumbled away into nothing. It was only then that the terrified commander realized just how embarrassing and shameful his reaction was, but no one was looking at him with disdain and ridicule. It was because they were all staring at Xianxia with fear and shock in their expressions. It was because Xianxia was actually moving. He raised his left arm slowly, grabbed the ground in front of him, and dragged himself slightly forwards. Then he repeated the same motion, bit by bit, inch by inch, like an old man who was on his last breath. Xianxia crawled his way to the front. to where Jasmine and Keijai were. By now, Xianxia's world had turned completely dark gray. In this world, there was neither light nor sound. He couldn't feel pain, couldn't feel his own existence, and his own location was an enigma to him, much less Jasmine's location. But he had a feeling, one final bit of thought and willpower left in him, and he allowed it to guide him towards that unknown location. The world grew even quieter. Not only was it completely silent, time itself seemed to have come to a complete stop. Every person, every gaze was drawn to the crawling figure like they were stuck in a trance. No one had attempted to make a sound, much less move closer to him. Xianxia's movement was very, very slow. Every time he raised his arm, it felt like he was expending every last bit of strength he had in him. Even then, he could only move a few inches forward at a time, and every time felt like the absolute last strength he had in him. Yet, he was always able to defy expectations and raise his arm once more. The world remained eerily silent and still. An indescribable, sorrowful, terrible feeling was pouring into everyone's chest. Everyone could see that Xianxia was crawling towards the barrier Jasmine was held in. When the threat had disappeared and minds had calmed down, the people suddenly recalled that the devil before them hadn't come because he bore a terrible grudge towards them or Star God realm. The only reason he had come today was for Jasmine, for the sake of their heavenly slaughter Star God. To that end, he was willing to dye Star God realm in red and sacrifice everything he had. Her father had wanted to kill his own daughter for himself. He, on the other hand, had charged forth to his death for her. There was immeasurable irony and guilt in this. It was such a terrible contrast that they could scarcely bear it. The belief they had always held fast to was suddenly struck by something invisible and heavy. The soundless vibration of the impact refused to fade even though a long time had passed. Jasmine stared at Xianxia fixedly without a sound, a tear, or even an expression on her face. She just stared at him crawling ever so slowly towards her, not allowing him to leave her vision for even the briefest moment. Time seemed to flow exceptionally slowly in this silent world. What was an impossible distance to everyone's eyes was closed slowly, but surely by his one arm and undying will. Even stranger was the fact that no one had attacked Xianxia even though a long time had passed. Was it because of fear, or no one knew how much time had passed? No one even noticed how much time had passed. The only thing noticed in their trance was Xianxia reaching 100 feet away from the barrier. His unbearably broken arm continued to stretch forwards, grab the ground, pull. 99 feet. 90 feet, 60 feet, 30 feet. Finally, he was just a stone throws away from her. Keijai covered up her own lips with strength, trying not to leak even a bit of sound. Xianxia, the man she had teased or addressed as her brother-in-law, the man her sister had forcefully married her to right in front of her mother's memorial tablet, was originally a handsome and extraordinary person. But now his clothes were completely tattered, his entire body was covered in dried blood, his wounds were cracked, his bones were peeking into view everywhere. There wasn't a single part of his body that was even the slightly easy on the eye. In fact, he looked hundreds and thousands of times scarier than an evil spirit of hell who just climbed out of a blood pool. "Brother-in-law," she whispered. She never knew that there existed someone in the world who was willing to go so far for another person, for her sister. He was the idiot her sister had berated again and again. There literally wasn't anyone else who was stupider than him in the whole world. When Xianxia's hand hit a cold, icy barrier, his progress finally came to a stop. Even then, he struggled to raise his arm and grab the barrier blocking his way, hoping against hope that his fingers would somehow be enough to tear it down. Jasmine gently raised her white, delicate hand and pressed it against the colorless, formless barrier that separated her from that bony, blood-drenched palm. But they would never, ever touch again. "Jas, mine." Xianxia's voice was weaker than a mosquito's and rougher than sandpaper. His eyes were completely blind at this point, and yet somehow he was able to feel Jasmine clearly next to him. "I wanted to take them down with you, but I can't anymore. I couldn't do anything." Jasmine shook her head very, very gently. "It's okay. I'm satisfied with just you being here." His ears should have been, were deaf to the world, and yet somehow Jasmine's words were reaching his heart with impossible clarity. His hand tightened around the barrier bit by bit. The approach of death had never been as clear as it was now. "Jas, mine, if a next life exists, will we meet again?" "We will." Jasmine's smile was barely imperceptible, but her nod was filled with determination. "No matter who you turn out to be in your next life, a man, a devil, a plant, a beast, I will always find you." The corner of Yun Chi's mouth curled as if he wanted to make a smile, but it was at this moment his hand slowly slid down the barrier. His voice was as weak as fading smoke. Her voice was as illusory as thin mist, but to the ears of these divine sovereigns and divine masters, they might as well be a crack of thunder. One by one, the star guards bowed their heads in uncontrollable emotion, and even the heavenly demon star god and heavenly jade star god were looking away from behind another barrier. They couldn't begin to describe how unwell they felt. He was the one who intruded in this place. He was the one who interrupted the ritual, and he was the one who killed hundreds of star guards and even an elder. And yet somehow, they felt like they were the ones who were bathed in sin. The unnatural atmosphere caused the star god emperor's expression to change again and again. Finally, he let out an angry roar. "What are you all doing? Kill him now!" The fury of a god emperor exploded like thunder in the star guards' heads. The heavenly strength star guard commander, who had humiliated himself earlier, hurriedly made an appearance. But he still didn't dare to get too close to Yun Chi just like before. He grabbed his star god spear and tossed it out in a sparkle of starlight. The star god spear passed through 100 meters and struck Yun Chi perfectly at the back of the heart. Not only had the weapon penetrated all the way to the ground, the exploding starlight even caused Yun Chi's body to crack open in a dozen or so places. Yun Chi neither struggled nor groaned in pain. In fact, he didn't feel anything at all. The only difference was that the footsteps of death had quickened ever so slightly. "Ah, brother-in-law, brother-in-law!" Keijai slammed against the barrier and finally broke down in tears. Her cry was filled with terrible sorrow and despair. She kept slamming her hands against the barrier again and again, but her power was suppressed to the point where it couldn't leave even a mark on it. Jasmine was completely silent. She simply continued to stare at Yun Chi. The fact that Yun Chi hadn't reacted to the successful attack at all finally gave cause for the heavenly strength star guard to relax completely. Eyes widened, the man let out a cry and charged at Yun Chi while the remaining star guards followed him quickly from behind. In an instant, countless spears, swords, starlight, and more were locked onto Yun Chi's figure. Clang! There was a vermilion flash, and Honger abruptly appeared next to Yun Chi. She pounced onto Yun Chi and lifted his remaining arm, a heart-rending cry already escaping her lips before she even started speaking. "What happened to you, master? Ooh, ooh, get up, get up." Honger and Yun Chi's souls were linked together. The eternally happy and carefree girl had seemed like sadness would never touch her. But when she sensed that Yun Chi's soul was about to fade into nothingness, an unprecedented sadness and fear immediately gripped her and drove her to tears. Run, quickly!" Yun Chi could no longer make a single sound. His final cry was also his final thought. Unfortunately, the contract he shared with Honger was something Jasmine had forcefully applied to him with her soul star relegation. As a result, he couldn't cancel the contract even if he wanted to. His final thought caused Honger to cry even harder than before. No. I don't want to. Honger just wants Master to, get up, Master. Honger will listen to you more in the future. Honger won't be greedy in the future. Honger won't make you angry on purpose anymore. So Master, get up. Sha. Another star god spear fell down from the sky and penetrated Yun Chi's body, the blast of power snapping his body in half. In the next instant, countless more starlights rained onto Yun Chi. Mass. Honger's final scream dissipated into the air. The chaotic blasts utterly shattered Yun Chi's powerless, broken body into countless tiny pieces, and Honger vanished from the world in one last vermilion light. Yun Chi died under the starlight. He died under the gaze of all the star guards and star gods. He had been broken apart and shredded before Jasmine's and Keijai's very eyes. Keijai's weeping stopped, and she simply stared dumbly into space. Her face and starry eyes had lost all color. Her frail and delicate body slowly sank to the ground inside that barrier as she knelt to the floor in a daze. His death had been determined the moment he forcefully used Other Shore Asura. Because it had burned up his life, profound veins, soul, mind, will. All of this had been exchanged for that power of despair. Furthermore, following his death, Honger and He Ling, whose lives and souls were tied to him, had also died as well. Yun Chi had died, but he had also created a nightmare for the star god realm, one that would never ever be able to be wiped away, while inflicting a gigantic loss on them. His death was also unable to cleanse away the wrath and fear the star god emperor felt. He had long ago stopped caring about the ceremony, and he stood up inside the barrier that surrounded him while roaring, "Destroy his body. You're not allowed to leave a strand of hair or drop of blood behind." Yes, All the star guards were stunned, but they swiftly gave a response as many beams of starlight started to gather once more. But before they could even make their move, scarlet flames started to burn on Xianxia's broken and shattered body at this very moment, as if the divine blood in his body was releasing their final divine glow after he had died. The flames swiftly linked together while they burned on his broken body, creating a small sea of flames. Within this sea of flames, the broken parts of Xianxia's body swiftly burned up as they disappeared piece by piece, until all of it had been completely burned to ash and returned to nothingness. Just as the Star God Emperor had wished, not even a single strand of hair or drop of blood remained. Not even a single bit of Xianxia's corpse still remained. It had well and truly disappeared. Sighs rang out in the hearts of various people. Some felt as if a heavy burden had rolled off their backs, some felt incessant regret and pity, but most of them felt complex feelings that were hard to define. What had died was not only Xianxia, because the person who had died was someone who had possessed the power of a creation god, someone who was able to combine both the phoenix and golden crow flames, someone who could release a manifest god, someone who could induce a 9-stage heavenly tribulation, someone who could control heavenly law tribulation lightning, someone who could explosively raise his strength to that of a divine master's despite being a divine king. This was an extraordinary divine genius, the likes of which had never been seen in the annals of history, and the likes of which would likely never be seen ever again. My king, since Xianxia is dead, then it's about time for us to start today's ceremony. There is nothing more important than this matter for my king, and for the Star God realm right now. Once the ceremony has been completed, my king will attain unsurpassed divine power, so the souls of the 37th Elder and all the Star Guards who have died will definitely be extremely satisfied with the result. Heavenly Origin Star God Tumi spoke up to remind the Star God Emperor. The Star God Emperor closed his eyes, and it took several breaths before the rise and fall of his chest truly went back to normal. He gave a faint nod of his head before speaking in a deep voice. Forget about everything that just happened. Focus your minds and your hearts. Let us proceed with the ceremony. All the star gods and elders complied with those words and closed their eyes as they sought to calm down the ripples that spread through their hearts. Keji's face was a ghastly white, and she felt a cold sensation spread throughout her body. Even when she had been coldly stared at by everyone when she was a child, she had never felt so cold before. She looked towards Jasmine, the last bit of warmth and support in her life, only to discover that she was still lost in her stupor. "Big sister," Keji called out to Jasmine, but Jasmine did not respond in any way whatsoever. She looked straight ahead, but there was nothing reflected in those starry eyes. Instead, they were losing color bit by bit. "Little girl, I don't really understand what you just said, but you have been sleeping inside the sky poison pearl for so long, so can you tell me your name?" Jasmine. She still remembered how aloof and disdainful she was to Xianxia at that time. She was the heavenly slaughter star god, and he was just a lowly creature from the lower realms, and even his profound veins had been crippled. Just based on status and level alone, merely favoring him with a gaze or speaking a single word to him was already bestowing a blessing upon him. Jasmine, the jasmine flower, is adorable and delicate. It exudes a strong fragrance, and it's flawless and pure white. It is a name that really suits you. Flawless and pure white. I am Jasmine, a jasmine that has been dyed blood-red by a countless amount of fresh blood. The third condition is to kneel down, kowtow to me, and take me as your master. Why? You're not willing to? Given her status, taking Xianxia as a disciple was simply the greatest loss of dignity in the world. Furthermore, the first reaction of the Xianxia at that time was actually unwillingness. He even forcefully tried to show off his so-called lofty and unyielding character, a character that he presumptively thought was as hard and unyielding as metal. How old are you this year? 13 years old. 13 years old. You're even younger than me, so it's not appropriate for you to be my master, right? Fine, I can take you as my master, but I won't kowtow to you. I, Xianxia, can kneel towards my seniors, kneel towards my benefactors. Well, I guess I can kneel towards my wife as well. But kneeling towards a little girl like you whom I've only known for a few days, I can't do it. That is the most basic dignity of being a man. HMPH, that isn't for you to decide. That day she had stepped on Xianxia's head, her every word mocking him as she looked down on him from above. Do you feel like your bones are very hard now, that you are really great? Without strength, you don't even have the ability to refuse to kowtow to me. So what right do you have to act haughty in front of me? Without strength, your presumptive pride and dignity are nothing but a joke in front of the so-called strong. Right now, do you have any questions you want to ask of me, your teacher? I do. I want to ask, did your hair not manage to grow in time, or are you naturally a white tiger? Jasmine's expression finally changed. The corner of her lips lightly smoothed out, and a shallow smile that was very small and very beautiful appeared on her face. A smile that Xianxia had not seen for many years already. But he would no longer have the fortune to be graced by that smile. Thump, thump. For some odd reason, the world had become abnormally quiet, and she could hear the sound of her heart beating with incomparable clarity. Idiot, idiot. You sex fiend who is willing to disregard your very life for the sake of a woman. Idiot. If you die terribly one day, it will definitely be because of a woman. Hey, if that woman was you, then I just might be perfectly willing to do so. Save these kind of foolish words of yours and use them to coax those idiotic women. Thump, thump, thump. It seemed as if her heart was beating faster and faster, was beating more and more intensely. Jasmine, to reconstitute your body, that was the request you gave me the very first day we met, and it has also been your only request all this while. Because I met you. It allowed a cripple like me to gain a new life, and I was able to regain my dignity as well. Because of you, I could protect my grandfather and my little aunt from all harm and mistreatment. Because of you, I found out about my past and I was able to find my real parents. All of the power, status, dignity, and fame that I possess today is due to you. If not for that chance meeting with you, I might have died a dog's death a long time ago. Even if I was still alive, I would possibly only be a wandering ghost that hovered on the edge of despair. But in the end, I could not even help you realize this one desire of yours. Xianxia, how much longer will you persist with this foolishness? If you are acting so desperately because you think that you need to repay my kindness for those reasons that you just listed out, then you can jolly well stop. Everything that I have done has been entirely for my own sake. I don't need you to gamble your life over a mere netherworld Udambara flower. Let's not even talk about the fact that it's impossible for you to currently succeed. Even if you do manage to obtain it, I won't feel the least bit grateful. Rather, I'd only feel that your stupidity knows no bounds. Repay your kindness. How could it just be to repay your kindness, Jasmine, to me? How could you simply just be a benefactor to me? You are even younger than me, yet from such a young age, you could only rely on yourself to live. I know just how enormously painful and sad that kind of life is. Even though you are haughty, stubborn, foul-tempered, and you love to scold me, you have never allowed me to pity you, but I know that you definitely desire freedom more than anything else. A master's order cannot be disobeyed, but in my heart, you are not merely my master. You are also my Jasmine. On that day, for the sake of a netherworld Udambara flower that did not even have all of its petals, the roar that he had made as his soul was on the brink of collapse caused Xianxia's figure to be firmly carved into every corner of her soul. Yet perhaps, he had long ago carved himself into her world. It was just that she had not yet noticed it. Thump, 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 thump. I'm fine with being foolish and I don't care about courting death either. In comparison to meeting you, everything else is unimportant. Jasmine, I indeed should not have presumed your thoughts, nor should I have presumed that you have missed me as much as I have you. But at least it can't be denied that I put in great effort and risked my life every day during these 3 years in the God realm in order to find you. In the end, I didn't even hesitate to barge into the conferred God battle so that you could hear my name. Even if you truly have utter disdain for me now, at the very least, let me get a glimpse of you. Allow me to tell you in person all the things I wanted to talk about with you. And, Jasmine, from the first day that I met you in this place, I was able to detect that your body and heart were being held down by very heavy chains, including the day that you chose to ruthlessly sever all ties to force me to leave. I am firmly convinced that it was not only for my own safety. If not, you clearly could have used many other methods which were far better than that. But don't you worry, I won't probe any further. If it's a burden that even you are having difficulty dealing with, then even if you told me, given my minuscule and insignificant strength right now, there is no way I could help you. Furthermore, it would only become another chain and burden to hold you down. After I enter the eternal heaven realm, I won't allow myself any slackness or distraction. And 3 years from now, I will have grown to the point where you will be willing to tell me everything, so that I can break the chains that bind your body together with you. It would be best if I could also protect you, and if I could do it forever. Xianxia, why did I have to meet you? It was probably so that you could marry Keijai to me, haha. Jasmine, I did not come to save you. I am a piece of trash. I can't save you. The only thing I can do is to accompany you. If a next life does exist, will we meet again? Thump, thump, thump. Xianxia, after we separated in the profound sky continent. Because of me, you chased me all the way to the eastern divine region, and then you chased me all the way to the eternal heaven god realm. And because of those words I said, you put everything on the line in order to obtain first place in the conferred god battle. And once more because of me, you disregarded all the consequences and barged into the star god realm just to die together with me. You're still that idiot, the greatest, most foolish, most incorrigible idiot I have ever seen in my entire life. From when you first entered the god realm and you were still a petty and nameless character, to when you first entered the divine way, and then to when your name shook the world, every single step of your progress was not because you wanted to see an even wider world or because you wanted scale ever greater heights. It was merely because you wanted to be able to track me down and get closer to me. But as for myself, from start to finish, I was terrified and I tried to avoid you, thought of every possible method to push you away, presuming that it was for your own good, presuming that it could save you and save Xianxia. Yet in the end, it harmed you, harmed Xianxia, harmed myself. I was the one who harmed you. I was the one who harmed Xianxia if I wasn't so presumptuous and full of myself, if I could just copy just a little bit of your bravery. Everything happened because of me. Xianxia, I am not worthy of receiving such treatment from you. Ping. Within the sea of Jasmine's heart, it was as if many crystals and stars were shattering, dispersing a fast-fading brilliance. Xianxia had died. He had become scattered ashes and smoke before her very eyes, and in doing so, he had carried away the last warmth and color she had in her life. This had also obliterated all of her hesitation, all of her weakness, all of her attachment, all of her hope, all of her goodness. Thump, thump, the sound resonated inside Jasmine's world, and it also resonated in the ears of everyone present. All of the star gods and elders within the barrier, and the star guards outside the barrier, jerked their heads upwards at this moment as they dumbly stared at the sky. For no reason whatsoever, the atmosphere abruptly became stifling and oppressive, and it was as if there was a giant heart that was pulsing intensely between heaven and earth, releasing a thumping noise that directly impacted one's very soul. What is going on? What is that sound? Who is it? Thump, THUMMPP, THUMMPPP. It rang louder and louder, and it grew nearer and nearer. Gradually, it began to feel as if one's own heart was being shaken. This was the star god city that was isolated by the absolute star soul barrier. Xianxia had only been able to barge inside because his body contained the star god blood that Jasmine had gifted to him, and that was already a huge mishap. So just what was going on with this oppressive and bizarre sound? There was not just the sound of a heart beating. There was also a mood of extreme disquiet that was birthed in the hearts of everyone, a disquiet that spread swiftly through their hearts like an epidemic. The star god emperor and the rest of the star gods, who had just managed to settle their hearts a little, all looked up as they stared towards the origin of the sound with sunken brows. Moreover, their complexions were also swiftly and dramatically changing, because even they could clearly sense that there was an extremely enormous sense of disquiet, a disquiet that was growing larger and larger with each passing moment. Big sister? Xianxia looked towards Jasmine as she called out to her dispiritedly. Her body was stuck against Jasmine's, so she could very clearly sense that the sound of the heartbeat that was so loud that the entire star god city could hear it was actually coming from Jasmine. Big sister, Allah! She shouted several times before suddenly letting out a cry of alarm, because she saw Jasmine's eyes. The pupils of her eyes were pitch black, and an incomparably terrifying emptiness appeared in them. There was no longer a single trace of their normal brilliance, which was even more lustrous than the stars themselves. They looked like an endlessly black night sky, a sky that had lost all of its stars. Wuya, the three great god emperors of the eastern divine region, still had not left. Due to the isolating effect of the absolute star-soul barrier, however, they were completely unaware of what was happening in Star God City. The absolute star-soul barrier can't be maintained for too long. 7 more days would be the absolute limit. Are the two of you going to continue waiting? The eternal heaven god emperor asked. Since I've come all the way here, then I'm naturally going to wait, the Brahma heaven god emperor said with a laugh. A momentous event that would cause the star god realm to open the absolute star soul barrier is very likely to affect our entire eastern divine region. If we aren't able to get to the bottom of this matter at the earliest opportunity we have, how can we feel at ease? Compared to the Brahma Heaven God Emperor, the Moon God Emperor's expression was a bit more solemn and serious. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor gave a small nod, and as he thought of the Xianxia who had slipped through the absolute star soul barrier, a look of worry once again emerged on his face. For the time being, let's not discuss why Xianxia would suddenly rush over here from the Dragon God realm. Now that he's entered the Star God realm, it will definitely be considered an unexpected incident by the Star God realm, who has currently sealed themselves off from the world to undertake a huge task. I'm afraid that, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor need not fret, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor said. Xianxia isn't any ordinary junior, his innate talent is unmatched, and he is also the child of the heavens that the heavenly mystery three elders have personally prophesied about. Even more than that, he has the Dragon Monarch's protection, so no one would be willing to take action against him. What's more, in the end, his power is still very weak, so even if it is an unexpected incident, it isn't a critical one. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor nodded and said, I hope that's the case. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor's gaze swept across the Eternal Heaven God Emperor's face as his laughter grew even richer. It looks like even though Xianxia chose to stay in the Western Divine Region's Dragon God realm, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor is still deeply concerned about him. This child truly has great fortune. Speaking of which, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor must definitely be feeling extremely regretful over the fact that he did not enter the Eternal Heaven Pearl and chose to stay in the Dragon God realm instead. But if you want him to return to the Eastern Divine Region, it actually wouldn't be too hard of a task. Oh, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor said as his eyes slanted to the side. Everyone under heaven knows that the reason Xianxia went to the Dragon God realm and has not returned is because he is afraid of the Moon God Emperor. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor said cheerily as he looked at the Moon God Emperor. As long as the Moon God Emperor is willing to say something and make it known that he will not make things difficult for Xianxia over the matter of the God Empress, then he will naturally return. Wouldn't you agree, Moon God Emperor? The Moon God Emperor declined to comment. He looked to the side as he coldly narrowed his eyes. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor continued. As such, it will clearly show that the Moon God Emperor has a broad and magnanimous heart, and it will also fulfill the wishes of the Eternal Heaven God Emperor. Xianxia's growth in the future will be a positive for the Eastern Divine Region. It will kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Wouldn't that be simply beautiful? The Brahma Heaven God Emperor is absolutely right, the Moon God Emperor said with a smile that was not a smile. Since this king has already taken Qingyu as my foster daughter, then I naturally won't be bothered with trying to pursue the matter with that kid Xianxia. But as for why that kid chose to stay in the Dragon God realm, Brahma Heaven God Emperor, it can't be that you truly... Thump. Before the Moon God Emperor's voice had finished falling, he felt his heart fiercely wrench. The complexions of the 3 great God Emperors changed at the very same instant. What is going on? The Moon God Emperor said in a deep voice. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor's brows knitted together. He instantly released his spiritual sense and swept it over the vast world surrounding them. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor raised his head. At this time, the heavens themselves had suddenly gone dark, and dark clouds that came out of nowhere were swiftly gathering. They whirled and rolled around before finally pressing down layer by layer. Not long after, the blue skies that had been engulfed by those black clouds had been pressed down completely, and it was almost to the point where it was touchable. This is... The expressions of the 3 great God Emperors abruptly grew extremely heavy and imposing. They had seen a similarly bizarre occurrence a little more than a year ago. At that time, the rolling black clouds had engulfed the entire Eastern Divine Region, and what followed was an incomparably world-shocking 9-stage lightning tribulation. Moreover, this time was different from the last. Because the eerie gloominess and the oppressiveness that followed the sinking down of these black clouds were more than 1,000 times heavier and more terrifying than it had been the last time. It was so terrifying that all 3 great God Emperors found it impossible to breathe. As their souls were being overwhelmed by shock, they began to spasm and convulse like never before. Within Star God City, black clouds had also covered the skies. An invisible oppression was fiercely pressing down on everyone's chest. Between the heavens and the earth, the sound of that heart beating was getting louder and louder. It was as if a devil god of the primal chaos, which was even larger than their god realm, A devil god that had been sleeping for untold eons, had suddenly been roused and had started to point its sharp fangs and devilish claws towards this weak and frail world. What's going on? What exactly is going on? Under this oppression that was far too dreadful, even the star gods themselves felt a deep feeling of disquiet emerge in their hearts. Swiftly, this sense of unease quickly morphed into fear, a fear that was growing deeper and deeper, a fear that caused their souls, hearts, bodies, and even hair to shake crazily. Thump, 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 thump. That heartbeat was growing heavier and heavier, more and more frenzied, and that extremely dreadful aura had now filled every corner of this world. Only Jasmine remained completely motionless. She did not react in the slightest. It was only that the pupils of her eyes had become incomparably pitch black and empty. Xianxia, Xianxia, Xianxia. Big sister, what's going on with you? Big sister. Xiaxia's complexion was a deathly white as she faced the person who was the closest to her in her very life. For some odd reason, her heart was pulsing with an extremely deep fear. She called her name time and again, but Jasmine had never given a single response. In the end, she desperately suppressed all of her dread as she moved forward to grasp her hand. In an instant, her hand jerked back as if she had been electrocuted, her pale face going even whiter. Big sister. Jasmine's hand was incomparably icy and cold. It was even colder than the coldest regions of the extreme north. Furthermore, it was the kind of cold that directly pierced through one's heart and soul. At this moment, Jasmine suddenly moved. She raised her left hand and pressed it against the barrier that had sealed her and Xianxia inside, the barrier that was also suppressing all of their power. On the back of her hand, the mark of a pitch-black wheel flashed before abruptly releasing a cluster of incomparably dense black light. The moment this cluster of black light appeared, it was as if a black hole, which possessed an infinitely strong ability to rend things apart, had manifested in their midst. Everyone's spiritual senses and gazes were drawn towards it by an inexorable force and focused on it. As everyone dumbly stared at the black light flashing on Jasmine's hands, their eyes began to unconsciously grow bigger bit by bit. The color black was a color that could not be more common or familiar in the world. But not a single one of them had known that the color black could actually be so dense and deep. That cluster of black light was very tiny, but as they stared straight at it, for some odd reason, the same terrifying thought emerged in everyone's mind. That cluster of black light was enough to swallow any life form. It was enough to swallow this star god realm. It was enough to swallow everything in the entire universe. What? What is that? The heavenly origin star god was the first one to come to his senses, and he said those words involuntarily as his hair stood on end. Black light, there was no profound artifact in the star god realm that could release that kind of profound light, and it was even more impossible for it to be the heavenly slaughter star god's own power. This black profound light was clearly the profound light that would only be emitted by darkness profound energy. But all of the dark devils, or creatures of darkness, that he had met in his lifetime that had spanned tens of thousands of years, the dark, profound light they released had never given him such a feeling of terror. The star god emperor was left speechless. He wanted to know what that cluster of black light was more than anybody else. Just what exactly had happened to Jasmine's body, and what exactly was happening to the entire star god realm. As the black light brilliantly flashed, beams of black-colored streaks of light were abruptly released from the left hand that was being covered by black light. It swiftly spread and radiated across every part of Jasmine's body, and in a few short breaths, these fine black streaks of light had already covered her entire body. At this moment, her hair started dancing in the air and within everyone's extremely shocked eyes. Her hair, the hair that had been dyed with the heavenly slaughter's divine power, the blood-red hair which was a symbol of the heavenly slaughter star god, was slowly becoming pitch black as it danced in the air. It was even darker than an abyss, even deeper than a dark night sky. What exactly is going on here? Inside the barrier, most of the star god and elders had stood up. They had just somehow managed to regain their composure after the shock Xianxia had given them. But now, shock and fear bloomed in their hearts once more. But it was only just the beginning of everything. In the next instant, it would feel as if all their souls had flown straight to heaven. Crack? A tiny crack appeared beneath Jasmine's palm, but it produced an explosive cracking sound that ripped through the heavens and the earth. Furthermore, the instant this crack appeared, the eyes of all the star gods, elders and star guards just about exploded in shock. because this crack had actually appeared on the barrier that had locked up Jasmine and Keijai. The ceremonial barrier that had connected the power of 9 star gods and 36 elders, along with countless amounts of profound stones and profound crystals. The ceremonial barrier that, according to their knowledge and experience, was completely impervious to any damage or impact. No, it's not possible. The Star God Emperor stood up as his body shook, his eyes became completely bloodshot, and it was as if he had been plunged into a nightmare. Ka, the black light flashed yet again, and it instantly swelled up by several orders of magnitude as it engulfed Jasmine's long and slender left arm. After that, yet another long crack exploded on the barrier. Following that, the new crack connected together with the first crack, as the cracks began to swiftly spread out like spiderwebs. In the blink of an eye, it had directly spread throughout the entire barrier. An isolation barrier that had focused the peak powers and auras of a king realm. An isolation barrier that could be called the strongest isolation barrier in the universe. Under that bizarre light, it actually seemed like a layer of fragile and weak glass, as it was easily cut in two by that crack. After that, it shattered with an explosive bang. Cha? The sound of the strongest barrier in the universe shattering was so sharp and shrill that it sounded as if billions of awls had been stabbed into one's ears and heart. This barrier had not only linked together the power of 9 star gods and 36 elders, it had also linked their auras, and now that it had shattered, one could well imagine how dreadful the backlash was. Amidst a shattering sound that was so sharp that it rent space, countless star guards' eardrums were ruptured, and blood streamed from all 7 orifices. Furthermore, the 9 star gods and the 36 elders, including the Star God Emperor himself, all seemed to have been smashed by some heavenly mallet. Fresh blood wildly spewed from their mouths as their meridians and veins were ruptured, and countless wounds had even been inflicted on their internal organs. The ceremonial barrier that they were standing in, as well as the 2 layers of the absolute star soul barrier which sealed away Star God City and the Star God Realm respectively, had also completely collapsed in this instant. The sound of something being cracked open and rent apart filled the skies above the Star God Realm, as the explosively dispersing energy caused thousands of calamitous storms to be stirred up in those very same skies. It seemed as if a calamitous disaster had suddenly descended on the entire Star God Realm, as shocked roars and cries of misery filled the air. The 9 star gods and 36 elders, all of them lay flat on the ground, as they crazily vomited blood due to the far too dreadful backlash, as if they were going to vomit out all the blood in their bodies. They did not know exactly what kind of nightmare this was as a haze descended over their minds, and their souls had been shaken so badly that they were about to fly apart. Hee. Ooh, ooh. Hick, 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 hu ha 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 ha. Amidst this nightmarish world, a terrifying voice suddenly started ringing out in the air. This sound was very soft and very sharp. At times it was laughing, and at times it was crying. This crying laughter, when one first listened to it, it sounded like the voice of an infant, yet it was also extremely eerie and terrifying, causing everyone's bodies to go cold as if they had been plunged into an abyss of icy hell. They involuntarily raised their heads. The black clouds above had blocked out the sun, and they produced a scene that looked like the apocalypse was about to happen. But as those clouds tossed and turned, they actually started forming a dark and gloomy face. That was the face of an infant. Yet those eyes were even more sinister than that of a devil, as it let out laughs and cries that were even darker and more eerie than the cries of a malicious spirit. Hick, 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 hu hoo, ooh, yeah ha ha ha. Jasmine quietly stood under the face of that infant. Her entire body was covered in black markings, and her pitch-black hair danced even though there was no wind. Her previously blood-red eyes were now covered by a terrifying black light, a black light which caused her face to seem even more ghastly white than it already was. In her left hand, she held a pitch-black wheel. The wheel was about as large as her body, and the blades that had unfolded from it were as dense as a devil's fangs. She slowly raised those pitch-black eyes as she gazed upon the world that had been enshrouded with darkness, before letting out a voice filled with hatred and resentment. A voice that seemed to be coming from the deepest parts of some devilish hell. You deserve to die. All of you deserve to die. The Star God Emperor's eyes were fixed on the dark wheel in Jasmine's hand. His body started to shake. It started to shake so fiercely that it seemed as if his God Emperor body was going to fall apart, as though the most terrified and shaky voice he had ever issued in his life came from his lips. Evil infant, wheel of myriad tribulations. Realm, the calamitous storms that had been generated due to the absolute star-soul barrier splintering and collapsing had greatly shocked the three god emperors, forcing them to retreat by nearly 50 kilometers. But before they could recover their shock, they jerked their heads towards the sky. Hu-ha-ha, hu-ee-hee, ooh-woo, hick-hick, ooh-woo-woo, hey-hey-hey-hey, hick-hick-hick, yah-ha-ha-ha. The sound of laughter and the sound of crying, they were so dreadful that it felt as if one had been thrust into a hell of wailing ghosts. The three god emperors dumbly stared at the image of the demonic infant in the skies above them. Their minds blanked out for a few moments, but after they had snapped out of their stupor, one name exploded in their souls like millions of bolts of apocalyptic lightning. Evil infant? All of the three god emperors spoke simultaneously, and their voices were the most shaky and terrified they had ever been in their entire lives. No, no, impossible, impossible. The eternal heaven god emperor said as he shook his head again and again. It was as if his soul had flown out of his body. This image of the evil infant is exactly the same as the one that is recorded in history, the moon god emperor said. Besides the legendary world-destroying wheel, what else could release such a terrifying aura? The head of the four god emperors of the eastern divine region, the Brahma heaven god emperor, whose emotions were almost never shaken, was actually trembling all over as he said in a dazed voice, "The reason that the star god realm has closed themselves off this time, could it actually be because of this?" "No, it's not possible." The moon god emperor shook his head. "This is the world-destroying wheel we are talking about. Even if the star god emperor had truly found it, even if he was 10 million times crazier, there's still no way he would have woken it up on purpose." If one were to ask a profound practitioner in the god realm what the most terrifying thing in the universe was, then, no matter which star realm they were from and whatever level they were at, any profound practitioner would give the exact same answer. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. The treasure ranked second among the 7 great heavenly profound treasures of the primordial era, the terrifying devil wheel that was known as the world-destroying wheel. Furthermore, its title, the world-destroying wheel, was absolutely not just a mere title. It had truly destroyed the past age, and the age that it had buried had been the age of the gods and the devils. An existence which had destroyed all of the true gods and the true devils, and had ended the era of the gods and devils. It was the most terrifying existence in the whole world, in the entire history of the primal chaos. Furthermore, it had only been slightly more than 1,000,000 years since it had previously destroyed the world. In a world where there were no gods, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had also disappeared without a trace. The only thing that remained of it were the records of it that were left behind, and every single word of those records were filled with terror and dread. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations would not disappear, nor could it be destroyed. After it had destroyed all of the gods and devils, it still remained in some corner of this universe. People desired to find it, but at the same time, they were also afraid to find it. It was undoubtedly true that if one were to find any of the other heavenly profound treasures, it would be the luckiest thing that could happen to them in all their lifetimes. But when it came to the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, as long as it was not an absolutely insane and frenzied madman, one would definitely not hesitate to do all they could to seal it away if they managed to find it. Even if one had to organize and concentrate all of the power in the world to seal it away, no one would ever think of trying to awaken it or control it instead. But today, in the eastern divine region's star god realm, after wiping out the gods and devils 1,000,000 years ago, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had once again appeared in the world. Furthermore, it had not simply reappeared, it had revealed itself with an awakened evil infant and a world-shocking devilish energy. Following the shattering and collapse of the absolute star-soul barrier, the 3 god emperors could also clearly sense the auras of the star god emperor and the other star gods underneath the devilish energy that spread through the heavens. Furthermore, their auras were strange and chaotic, and it seemed as if all of them had sustained heavy injuries. The absolute star-soul barrier had been forcibly destroyed, so it was absolutely normal for them to sustain heavy injuries due to the backlash. Furthermore, being able to forcibly break the absolute star-soul barrier meant that this power had exceeded the combined strength of the star god emperor, the star gods, and the star god elders. It was a power that surpassed any known level, a power that basically should not even exist in this current world. Could it be that this is actually the calamity of the eastern divine region? the eternal heaven god emperor muttered to himself. After that, his brows sank and knit together and extended his arm, a rather large sound transmission profound formation appearing in front of him. All guardians, heed my command. The evil infant has reappeared. Danger approaches the eastern divine region. As such, no matter where you are and what situation you find yourself in, all of you are to immediately head to the star god realm at the greatest possible speed. Bang. By the time the sound transmission profound formation collapsed and dispersed, the eternal heaven god emperor had already generated a vast energy wave, rushing toward the location of the evil infant. The Brahma heaven god emperor and the moon god emperor exchanged glances. The eternal heaven god emperor had been absolutely right. If the evil infant had truly re-emerged, then it was definitely a calamity that would strike the eastern divine region. Underneath the shadow of this impending calamity, all of their grievances and resentments suddenly seemed utterly shallow and insignificant. The two great god emperors constructed sound transmission, profound formations simultaneously, as they both issued the most austere and solemn god emperor edicts. All moon gods, heed my command, immediately head to the star god realm at the fastest speed possible. All Brahma gods and Brahma kings, heed my command, immediately head to the star god realm at the fastest speed possible. Even though the four great king realms were quite a great distance away from each other, all of them were connected by teleportation profound formations, so they could travel to each other's domain in the shortest amount of time. Furthermore, though the eternal heaven god emperor had only summoned the guardians, the moon god emperor had only summoned the moon gods, and the Brahma heaven god emperor had summoned both the Brahma gods and the Brahma kings. This was still the highest levels of power that existed within their respective king realms. Under the terrifying devilish might the emerging evil infant was releasing. Summoning those whose powers were weak in comparison was no more than vainly sending them to their deaths. Moreover, it was also because they were suddenly faced with the calamity of the evil infant that had abruptly descended on them. All of them definitely could not afford to be selfish or hold anything back, even if it was very likely that it would result in serious losses that would harm the strength of their foundations. The sound transmission profound formations collapsed and dispersed, and the two great god emperors also swiftly chased after the eternal heaven god emperor as they made for Star God City at the greatest possible speed. Moreover, at this moment, every single living creature, every single thread of air, and every single grain of sand in Star God City was trembling in fear. Not a single one of them had ever seen the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, but the name of that world-destroying wheel resounded in their hearts like an irresistible, cruel curse that branded itself into their souls. The pitch-black wheel that had been recorded in the annals of history, the terrifying evil infant that was wailing and laughing, and also the one who had started everything and allowed that devil wheel to be attached to her. The heavenly slaughter star god, a person they were extremely familiar with, yet at this moment she seemed incomparably foreign to them. Nightmare, nightmare, it was all a nightmare. Big sister, big sister. Xianxia lay paralyzed on the floor as she dumbly stared at the Jasmine who was holding the devil wheel. She was clearly no longer restrained or sealed in any way, but it was as if she did not possess the power to stand up on her own. Jasmine, you! The star god emperor lay on the ground. Even though he had been injured by the backlash, it had definitely not been enough to render him unable to stand. Yet every cell in his entire body was trembling uncontrollably, and his four limbs had gone so weak and limp that he could not control them. All around him, all of the star gods and star god elders also lay paralyzed on the ground, and not a single one of them stood up. Evil infant, evil infant. Ah, SSS. This can't possibly be real. They had seen the most terrifying thing in the universe and were currently enduring the most dreadful aura in the universe. Furthermore, all of these things had actually come from Jasmine, the pitiful star god that was originally supposed to become a sacrifice just a short while later. The world-destroying wheel that had slaughtered all the gods and devils, the artifact that all living creatures feared, was actually possessed by their star god realm's heavenly slaughter star god, Princess Jasmine, and might actually have been in her possession for a very long time already. How could this be something that they could believe or accept? It not only existed within Jasmine's body, even its soul and power had been awakened. You, Lot, deserve to die. Deserve to die? Crack. A peal of thunder resounded in the air as a lightning bolt flashed through the sky. This pitch-black bolt of lightning was also something that was beyond anyone's knowledge. Furthermore, it was as if this bolt of black lightning had alarmed a devil god that had just been awakened from slumber, as all of Jasmine's long hair, that was now as black as night, started to dance in the air. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations also released a dense black light, and it was as if a devil's eye had suddenly blinked open when Jasmine rushed toward the absolutely shocked star god emperor. The wheel blades that were enshrouded in black light contained a killing intent and devilish energy that seemed to resemble a devil from purgatory as it cut through the air toward the star god emperor, cut through the air toward her birth father's head. No one knew why the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations would be on her person. This was Jasmine's greatest secret, and in this world only she knew about it. Not even Xianxia or Keijai had been aware of this. When she had been in the moon's slaughter devil nest all those years ago, she had taken in the evil infant after it had pleaded with her. She had done so in order to allow it to hibernate in her body forever, to never ever allow it to awaken or fall into another person's hands. But today, after Xianxia's death, after the death of all her attachments and all of the goodness within her, after her negative emotions had broken through some sort of terrible boundary, its power had been awakened. But the true culprit who had allowed its power to awaken had not been Jasmine, it had been the star god realm. The star god emperor still dumbly stood in place, and he did not react at all to this attack. "My king, be careful!" Heavenly origin star god Tumi let out a cry of alarm as he hurled himself to his feet and flashed in front of the star god emperor by using star god's broken shadow. His arms swiftly formed a heavenly origin barrier which directly took on the full brunt of the devilish wheel in Jasmine's hand. SZZZZZZ. The heavenly origin barrier blocked the demonic wheel, but the heavenly origin god's body violently shook as a mouthful of reversed blood violently surged through his internal organs that had just received a heavy injury. A long pitch-black crack had split open and spread over the heavenly origin barrier. The threads of black energy that gushed out from that crack wrapped around the arms of the heavenly origin star god. As the black energy neared his body, the heavenly origin star god's complexion dramatically changed. The black energy that covered his arms was as dense as a thick copse of trees. It was as if countless steel needles and hooks were gouging and ripping away at his skin, flesh, meridians, and bones, causing the features on his face to convulse in pain and terror, a terror that basically could not be resisted by willpower at all. SSSSSSSS. The blades of the wheel deeply cut into the heavenly origin barrier, and black energy exploded outwards, actually causing the barrier to directly collapse. The heavenly origin star god's arms spurted blood as he retreated very swiftly. Just what sort of existence was heavenly origin star god Tumi? He was a level 9 divine master and the number 2 person in the star god realm, whose power was second only to the star god emperor himself. His heavenly origin barrier was something that everyone in the star god realm recognized as the strongest defense. Even if it was the star god emperor himself, he definitely would not be able to penetrate it in such a short period of time. Yet in front of Jasmine and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, it had collapsed in a single breath. That peerlessly dreadful killing intent still remained fixed on the star god emperor's body. The wails and laughter of the evil infant resounded in every corner of the world, and the demonic wheel, which possessed the might to extinguish the world, pulsed with black light as it smashed towards its owner's birth father, the emperor of the star gods. The star god emperor finally came back to his senses with much difficulty. It was already too late for him to summon his profound artifact, so with a strange roar, he thrust both his hands out and fiercely pressed them against the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations pressed against his arms as a pair of eyes, which flashed with black light, stared straight at him. Those were the eyes of his own daughter, but they no longer glowed with that bloody brilliance, and they did not even contain a shred of warmth and reluctance. There was only boundless gloom, coldness, resentment, hatred, and killing intent. "Jas, mine, ah!" he softly called out to her, but after that his body shook violently as his face scrunched together under those convulsions. The 2 hands that he had used to block the evil infant wheel had been soundlessly enshrouded by black light, and the back of his hands and his fingers were swiftly turning pitch black. His skin and flesh were being devoured layer by layer within that absolute darkness, gradually revealing his stark white finger bones. Following that, even those finger bones were swiftly stained by a terrifying layer of black. Even though he had just been injured by the previous backlash, in the end, he was still the emperor of the star god realm. His body was the toughest and most durable divine body in the entire universe. But under that black light, it was actually turning into rotten flesh and withered bones in the blink of an eye. "Stop harming my king!" Heavenly Aster god Shenhu let out a loud roar which shook the heavens. He forcefully suppressed his injuries as the crazily surging Heavenly Aster divine power forced his body to explosively swell up. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a giant who was over 6.5 meters tall. Both of his arms had swelled up and expanded until they were several feet thick, with every single muscle, and every single mark on those muscles reflecting a cold, metallic light. The Heavenly Aster star god was the star god who possessed the greatest physical strength among the star gods, and he was also the only star god who did not possess a life-bound weapon. This was because his fists were the most terrifying killing tools in the entire star god realm. One punch was enough to destroy a star. Ha! As he gave a great roar, he sent his fist smashing down. The divine might gathered in his strike was like 10,000 mountains, colliding which exploded, as it directly smashed into the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. Boo! His fist collided with the demonic wheel, and the detonating sound was so loud that it actually violently rocked the heavens and the earth. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was fiercely smashed aside. The devilish pressure on the star god emperor's body immediately flew away, and he retreated in a fluster. He glanced at the fully exposed gray bones on his hands, the pupils of eyes contracting in a fit of fright and alarm. What was this power? How could there be such a dreadful power? The devil wheel had been blasted backwards, and Jasmine's body had also swung backwards under the Heavenly Aster power. Following that, it seemed as if she had become completely enraged. The pupils of her eyes and the demonic wheel in her hand suddenly radiated an even gloomier black light. Even the evil infant's wailing, which filled the sky, had also become more eerie and shrill. H-H-H-H-H-H-H? Shenhu gave a huge roar as his already dreadfully thick and solid arm actually swelled up again to twice its size. His enormous fist seemed to be a heavenly god's mallet as it heavily smashed downwards. In front of the Heavenly Aster star god who had transformed into a giant, Jasmine's figure was simply far too small and delicate. She was not even the size of his fist. Facing a power which could obliterate stars, the dark devil energy suddenly became distorted and sinister as the light of hatred exploded from Jasmine's eyes. She directly met the Heavenly Aster's fist with her world-destroying devil wheel. RIIIP, the world-destroying devil wheel collided in midair with the Heavenly Aster's fist. A black tear was ripped open in space, and it also tore at everyone's eyes, hearts, and souls. The peerlessly fierce might of the Heavenly Aster's divine power was broken and scattered like a bunch of soap bubbles. That black tear started from the Heavenly Aster star god's fist as it sheared away most of his forearm. The Heavenly Aster star god's arm, which held unparalleled divine might, had been severed from the elbow like a piece of bamboo. It had been cruelly sheared in half. UWAHHHHHHHHH. This sort of pain was even more intense than having an arm broken and shattered, and it was millions of times more cruel. The Heavenly Aster star god flung his arm backwards as he let out a lung-splitting, heart-rending cry of misery. The blood which spewed out all over the place was actually clearly tinted by a gloomy black color. Shenhu, the star gods that were in the background let out startled roars of alarm. At this moment, the demonic wheel that cleaved the Heavenly Aster star god's arm was radiating an even more terrifying black light, and yet another black tear appeared. A black tear that was even deeper and gloomier than the previous one. Amidst the wild laughter and the wailing howls of the evil infant, it ripped across the body of Shenhu, who had been crying out in hoarse pain. In the distant horizon, the eternal Heaven God Emperor, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor, and the Moon God Emperor were diving towards Star God City at the fastest speed in the universe. With a single glance, they spotted a young girl whose body was wrapped in black light and whose black hair danced in the air, and the pitch-black devil wheel she held in her hands, a demonic wheel that looked like a devil's eye. Furthermore, that gigantic person, who was radiating a startling divine might, was without a shadow of doubt the star god's Heavenly Aster star god. He was also in a state where all of his Heavenly Aster divine power was being fully unleashed. The devil wheel danced in the darkness, unleashing a black rip in space that looked like it came from some abyss. Underneath the power of this black tear, the Heavenly Aster star god, who was a level 9 divine master with the heavenly aster divine power protecting his body, was cut in half at the waist. When the three great god emperors who were speeding towards Star God City saw this scene, all three felt as if they had been smashed head-on by a huge mallet simultaneously. They stopped dead in their tracks and simply floated in the air, huge tidal waves rising up in their hearts. Shen, Hu, Shenhu. One of the star god realm's 12 star gods, the heavenly aster star god, had fallen. He had possessed a divine body that was protected by the heavenly aster's divine power. A body that a divine, profound practitioner could attack for millions of years without leaving even a single scratch. A body that was tough that it would be hard for even him to inflict a wound on himself. But underneath the might of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, he had instantly lost an arm, and in the next instant, he had been sheared in two. This, the heavenly slaughter, star god. With a single glance, the moon god emperor could tell that the young girl who was covered in devilish energy and holding that demonic wheel was clearly the eldest princess of the star god realm. It was just that. Why did her body possess such an aura? That icy coldness that could freeze one's very soul, that hatred and resentment that pierced into one's bone marrow, and that killing intent which caused the space 50 kilometers around her to tremble and shake. Just what exactly was going on? What exactly had happened? It looks like there are no other possibilities left to us anymore, the eternal heaven god emperor muttered. The evil infant has truly re-emerged. Jasmine's world was a haze of dusk, hatred, resentment, bloodlust, killing intent, despair, violent rage. It was filled with an endless and boundless amount of negative emotions. This world which had robbed everything from her, everything deserved to die, everything deserved to be destroyed. She raised up the devil wheel in her hand as the black energy explosively swelled by tens, no, hundreds of times as the evil infant cackled wildly, causing her body to be completely engulfed in dark energy. Boom. The demonic wheel smashed the ground and countless black tears swiftly shot outwards, spreading 5 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers. In the middle of the black tears, dark energy permeated the air, and the entire star god city was filled with this black energy in the blink of an eye, transforming into a world that had become wreathed by black light. In the midst of this black energy, a terrifying sensation of being devoured assaulted everyone from all directions, greatly shocking the already startled and afraid star gods and elders, causing them to swiftly release their divine master power to suppress the devilish energy that was corroding their bodies. Yet miserable cries started to ring out all around them, cries which split the heavens and shook the earth. In Star God City, all of the star guards had become shrouded by this black energy. Their legs, their arms, and their faces, all of the skin that could be seen turned a scorched black in an instant. They desperately released their divine sovereign power amidst their frantic screams of misery and terror as they tried to dispel the black energy. But this power which had easily ruined and devoured the body of the star god emperor, this power that had instantly obliterated the heavenly aster star god, was not something that they had any hope of defending against. No matter how they struggled or screamed, their bodies were still being devoured, layer by layer. And in a few short breaths, nearly all of the skin and flesh of these star guards had been corroded away, and their blackened bones could clearly be seen. The heavenly origin star god soared into the sky and desperately yelled, "Go! Hurry up and leave!" But just as his voice fell, the pupils of his eyes contracted with a jolt. Those cries of misery and pain were not limited to only Star God City. They were also coming from outside of Star God City. High in the sky, he could see that circle of black light spread out in all directions with Star God City at its center. It seemed as if a passage had been opened up between the entire Star God realm and a hellish abyss, and it was quickly being devoured up and turned into a dark hell. They had personally witnessed just how dreadful this dark, devilish energy was. Without a shadow of a doubt, this black energy would obliterate all life wherever it went, and not a single blade of grass would remain. This scene was also playing out with unspeakable clarity before the eyes of the three great god emperors as well. In this moment, they had personally seen hell itself. "Sent up! Jasmine, stop!" The star god emperor's eyes were so wide that his eye sockets looked like they were about to explode as he roared in a hoarse voice. "That isn't her highness. That is the evil infant," heavenly origin star god Tumi said, despair slowly filling his voice. The vast star god realm was being swiftly devoured by the devilish energy that was coming from the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. It might not be too long before the entire Star God realm would be completely and utterly reduced to a land of death. All of Star Gods and Elders, including the Star God Emperor himself, had sustained injuries due to the shattering and collapse of the barrier, so their power had also taken a great hit. Meanwhile, all of the Star Guards that had been guarding them had all descended into despair. They were facing the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations that had suddenly re-emerged in this world. An evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations that also seemed to have been woken up by a boundless hatred and resentment toward the Star God realm. The Star God realm was finished. It was finished. She is the evil infant, the Star God Emperor muttered in a low voice. The two words evil infant spilled from his lips and his vision went blurry for a moment. He still could not bring himself to believe that all of this was actually real. Following that, he slowly stood up and a silver light glinted in his hand. It was a silver broadsword, 12 stars inlaid in it. He pointed the sword at Jasmine, letting out an extremely low and deep voice. "She's already gone crazy. Everyone attack. Everyone." The miserable cries of the Star Guards were slowly growing softer and softer in their ears. They had fallen down in heaps as they were transformed into gray and withered skeletons inside the dark devilish energy. 3,000 Star Guards, 3,000 divine sovereigns, of which any single one of them could make an entire region tremble, had actually all been killed in the span of a single day. Half of them had died due to Xianxia's power of despair. The other half had died due to Jasmine's boundless hatred and resentment. The shattered barrier, the Star God Emperor and Tumi who had been easily blasted away, the Shenhu who had been split in half in a single instant. Every single thing told them just how terrifying the Star God Princess standing in front of them, the Star God Princess they had once been familiar with but had now become a stranger. They had the fortune to witness this sort of power. They had the fortune to witness the reemergence of the Devil Wheel. Yet it was very possible that they would become the first sacrifices to the newly awoken Devil Wheel, even though they were all divine masters who were viewed as unsurpassed and supreme existences in the eyes of the world. Hiss, screech, the demonic wheel that had smashed against the ground slowly rose into the air. Black ripped space apart, not halting for even an instant as it hurtled towards the Star God Emperor. This was her birth father, yet he had become the one person in the world right now that she hated the most and most wanted to kill. It was because she had compromised with him, believed him, and obeyed him that it had ended up hurting Keijai, hurting Jasmine so that the last bit of familial affection she had for him had become an enormous joke and grief for her. In the end, what it had birthed was only a hatred that desired to completely tear apart his body and soul. Even though the demonic wheel had been withdrawn, the countless black tears continued to swiftly spread through the Star God realm while carrying that black energy along with them. Perhaps before too long, it would completely engulf the entire Star God realm. The Star God Emperor had yet to move, but 3 great Star Gods behind him all thrust out their hands. The heavenly flame Star God's hands hooked into claws as a beam of flame pierced through the darkness and smashed against the Devil Wheel. The exploding intense flames instantly vaporized the black energy as the Heavenly Sun Star God and the Heavenly Soul Star God roared at the same time. Starlight dazzled the sky as it attacked from the left and right. 3 Star Gods had joined hands. What kind of strange and marvelous scene was that? Perhaps it would be better to say, what sort of situation in this universe was worthy of getting 3 Star Gods to combine their powers? A fire domain exploded out in front of them, dispersing the dark coldness and gloom that filled the world. But before this firelight that had come from a Star God could even last for longer than instant, the devilish markings on Jasmine's body flashed, and a black devilish light exploded from her slender white arm that was the complexion of clotted cream. It was dark devilish light that caused even the laws of heaven to tremble. BZZZZZZN. Under this devilish light, the fire domain was instantly extinguished, and the 3 great Star Gods, who had not even been able to draw near to her, all let out a stifled moan as they were blasted away into the distance. The black light created afterimages as she mercilessly thrust that world-ending demonic wheel towards the Star God Emperor whom she most wanted to destroy. BAANG. Yet another Star God obstructed Jasmine's path, and once again, it was the Heavenly Origin Star God. Every part of his body shone and pulsed with a dazzling starlight as the Heavenly Origin barrier he had erected with all his might fiercely blocked that demonic wheel. After that, a loud roar ripped out of his throat. Create the formation! The 12 Heavenly Star Formation was the formation that could only be created by a Star God. The power of the 12 star gods were all connected branches from the same source, and once the 12 heavenly star formation was complete, its might was enough to smite the heavens and destroy the earth. It was the strongest battle formation in the star god realm, and the more star gods that were used to form it, the more tyrannical its might would be. All of the star gods were greatly startled upon hearing the heavenly origin star god's command. But shortly after, all of them focused their spirits and guarded their hearts as they swiftly got into formation. This loud roar, however, caused the heavenly origin star god's aura to leak a little bit, and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations fiercely pressed forward. As black energy exploded outwards, the heavenly origin barrier was fiercely shattered by the devil wheel. The heavenly origin star god's entire body fiercely trembled, and his face went white. However, the dark demonic wheel had already grown large in his eyes, plunging his entire world into darkness. Baang, Baang, Baang. The dark demonic wheel smashed out 3 times, and it was barely blocked off by his arms and his power. But when the 4th blow landed, Toomey no longer had the strength to defend against it. Both his arms were smashed aside, and his protective profound energy was also shattered. The devil wheel pulsed with an abyssal black energy as it directly smashed into his chest. Boom. Before the heavenly origin star god had even finished vomiting that mouthful of fresh blood, the darkness devil wheel had already smashed directly against his chest yet again. Boom, 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 boom. Heavenly origin star god Toomey, Jasmine's teacher in the profound way when she had been just a child, was also one of the seniors she had respected most in life. But at this moment, that darkness devil wheel possessed not a single shred of hesitation or compassion as it hammered nightmarishly into his chest again and again. The blows cruelly smashed and shattered his bones and his chest, causing his heavenly origin body to stumble into a deeper and deeper darkness. Fresh blood wildly spewed from the heavenly origin star god's body, and every mouthful was tainted by a blackness that was even deeper than the last. The light in his eyes scattered as he was slowly losing consciousness, and he gradually could not even hear the alarmed cries of the other star gods in his ears. Boom. The black light ruptured, and Toomey's broken body was sent flying amidst the black mist that filled the air, and it was sent flying very, very far away. The star god emperor's eye sockets had practically fractured at this point, and he shot into the air with a low roar as he tried to grab the flying Toomey. But just as he rose to his feet, a peerlessly dreadful beam of black light flew past the corner of his eyes. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations flew out of Jasmine's hand, the rotating wheel blades creating pitch-black spatial vortexes in its wake as it flew towards Toomey and cruelly cut his head from his broken body. The pitch-black spatial vortexes let out sharp whistles and wails as they spun in midair. When the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations flew back into Jasmine's hands, Toomey's head had also dropped to the ground, and it rolled a very far distance on the ground of the star god realm that had been stained black. His eyes were still roundly staring. His bulging eyeballs and dilated pupils were proof of just how much despair and terror he had felt right before he died. As the imperial tutor and sage of the star god realm, he had never imagined that this would be his fate. He had used so much effort to scheme and plot and perfectly control everything from start to finish. But what he had obtained was not the success of the ceremony and the brilliant glory of the star god realm. Instead, he had birthed a dreadful devil god, a devil god that would very likely destroy the star god realm. At the very end of his life, he did not know if he felt more discontent, fear, or regret. Toomey had been someone who had influenced the star god emperor for his entire life. He had been his teacher in the profound way, his teacher in the ways of society, and he had also been the person who had guided and helped Xing Jukong to become the star god emperor, even though he was the heavenly chief star god. After becoming the star god emperor, he still continued to treat Toomey with extreme respect, and he was fine with being viewed on equal footing with him. So one could say that seeing Toomey die a miserable death in front of him had dealt an extremely huge blow to the star god emperor. His entire body trembled as he pointed his sword towards Jasmine. Jasmine, you clearly still possess your awareness. Could it be that you truly want to destroy the star god realm? Re-ip. As space completely shattered, what answered him was that dark demonic wheel that contained boundless killing intent as it flew toward him, ripping apart space in its wake. It was an attack without even the slightest bit of hesitation. Clang, the 12 stars inlaid into the star god emperor's sword shone together, and that instant of starlight bodily suppressed all of the darkness, causing the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations to freeze in the air. Both of the star god emperor's eyes were completely bloodshot, and his body flickered as he blinked forward, his sword piercing towards the devil wheel. 12 points of starlight flew out of the sword as it surrounded the devil wheel and formed a destructive star formation. Crash, the 12 stars ruptured. Explosively flashing starlight completely blocked out the sun, and the skies the next instant, practically dispelling all of the darkness and shrouding the star god realm, making it hard for even all the star god elders to open their eyes. The black light that radiated from the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was completely dispersed as it was sent flying downwards. In the blue skies above, the devilish infant's face within the black clouds immediately contorted as it let out a wail that was several times more shrill and mournful than before. This was the might of a god emperor, the highest level of power in this current world. This scene caused the gazes of the 3 startled god emperors, all of whom were still far away, to shake intensely as hope was birthed in their hearts. The moon god emperor could not help but crow excitedly. Great! It looks like the evil infant isn't invincible after all. Due to the influence of the aura within the primal chaos, the heavenly profound treasures in this current era simply cannot be compared to what they were during the era of gods. My eternal heaven realm's eternal heaven pearl is the same, the eternal heaven god emperor said slowly. Furthermore, according to what the eternal heaven divine spirit said, when the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations destroyed all of the gods and devils all those years ago, it had completely exhausted all of its power. Only a short million years have passed since then. This, coupled with the fact of the primal chaos aura growing muddy and turbid, means that even though the evil infant may have awakened, it definitely would not have been able to recover too much of its power. The eternal heaven god emperor's words, coupled with the fact that evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations' devilish light had been scattered by the star god emperor, caused the dark gloom in the hearts of the 3 god emperors to be immediately dispelled. But in the very next instant, their expressions once again changed due to shock. Amidst the starlight which had broken and destroyed the darkness, Jasmine's figure blurred as she once again snatched up the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. A pair of long and narrow black devilish eyes shockingly opened up on the pitch-black wheel. In a single instant, the black light that had been extinguished for a short moment once more flared to life with a fierce intensity. It rebounded to swallow all of the starlight that had been emitted by the star god emperor. And in the blink of an eye, it covered the heavens and blocked out the sun once more, as it devoured all of the light in the world. In just a moment, the entire star god city was left completely lightless. It returned to complete darkness, and one would not even be able to see their fingers if they stretched their hand out. The darkness had devoured the light, sealing away one's sight and even completely cutting off their spiritual perception. The 12 heavenly star formation was finally formed while everyone was panicking, but they had immediately lost all contact with the other star gods within the darkness. So just as the 12 heavenly star formation was formed, it was immediately dispersed. The previously linked auras were cut off from each other, and the auras of the 6 star gods, all of whom had already sustained very serious internal energies, were thrown into utter chaos, as even the spiritual senses of the star gods had been completely sealed by this darkness. Jasmine's body had already flashed to the side of the 6 star gods by the time the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations in her hand let out a dark and gloomy devilish hiss. Boom! A cluster of flames explosively ignited, and a flame domain that could originally ignite a 500-kilometer area was now suppressed by the darkness to the point where it could only occupy a few kilometers of space. Amidst the trembling firelight, Jasmine held that devil wheel in her hand. Soon, her black eyes that released a black light that threatened to bury the world, eyes that contained a hatred that could fill the skies, was only a few feet away from them. The already skittish and panicked 6 star gods were all greatly startled. They were still, however, star gods, so even though their hearts were thrown into chaos by the shock, their power had already been released before their minds could react. 6 great star gods and 6 different star god powers attacked Jasmine in unison. The 6 star gods had released their powers simultaneously, and in that instant, all sound had been extinguished. The entire world had descended into a dreadful silence for several instants. The only sound that remained was the wailing laughter of the evil infant image in the air, a sound that made one's blood run cold. Because, after 1,000,000 years of hibernation, its power had finally been awakened. It had finally been given new life. Hua-ha-ha, hick, 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 ooh. Boom. Devilish light detonated, and an incomparably dreadful black vacuum appeared around Jasmine's body, causing the power of the 6-star gods, the powers of 6 whole-star gods, to be completely obliterated, not allowing a single attack to even get near her body. Moreover, her counterattack had arrived nearly instantaneously, as a pitch-black ring of energy fiercely exploded forth with her body at the center. Be careful! When the black ring approached their body, no darkness devil energy had burst forth. Rather, it was as if their souls were being pulled into a black abyss as their vision, and the world of their hearts and souls grew pitch black. Reap! A black tear was carved into the heavenly flame star god, spreading from his left shoulder to the right side of his ribcage. It cruelly ruptured the flesh, bones, and internal organs across half of his body, while also extinguishing the firelight that had reignited not too long ago. Bang! The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations smashed directly into the heavenly demon star god's chest, and a beam of black explosively pierced through his back. Rose. The heavenly jade and the heavenly demon were twin brother and sister, so their hearts and minds were connected. The serious injury dealt to the heavenly demon allowed her heart and soul to struggle free from the darkness. However, the next beam of black light struck her directly in the middle of her back. PFFFT. The same black light pierced through the front of her chest as she wildly spat out fresh blood. Bang! The blades of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations pierced into the heavenly sun star god's chest, and as the wheel blades spun, the air was filled with scarlet-black blood foam. Reap! A black tear was carved across the legs of the heavenly soul star god. As the star god with the weakest body among the 12 star gods, his legs were instantly sheared from his body. Jasmine's body suddenly spun around, and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations shot out and directly hit the heavenly charm star god. Black and scarlet intertwined as black light interlaced with bloody mist exploded out from her perfect and flawless body. 6 consecutive instants, 5 star gods' broken shadows, and the 6 people who were lost in the darkness all sustained serious injuries from the devil wheel. Furthermore, these 6 individuals were no ordinary profound practitioners. They were not even ordinary powerhouses, they were the star gods. Star gods who stood at the pinnacle of the eastern divine region. Star gods whose power and status eclipsed that of all the lower realm kings, middle realm kings, and higher realm kings. 4 9th-level divine masters, 2 8th-level divine masters. It was a power that should have been unrivaled in the current world, a power that should have been unbreakable in this world. But at the hands of Jasmine, just a single strike was enough to cause this power to instantaneously crumble. The consciousness of the 6 star gods finally escaped the darkness, but what was waiting for them was a cluster of black lights that were even denser and gloomier than a black hole. Boom! Miserable cries filled the air, and these cries of misery had originated from the star gods themselves. The 6 great star gods all shot out in different directions, having been sent flying like broken bags of blood. Star god blood and darkness devil energy mixed together as they sprayed all over the sky. In the distance, the expressions of the 3 great god emperors had completely and utterly changed, as the hope that had previously risen up was mercilessly destroyed. We were far too naive to think that we actually thought we were going to get lucky with this one. That is the world-destroying devil wheel which wiped out all the gods and devils we're talking about, so even if it regained even the slightest bit of its powers, it also. The moon god emperor fiercely sucked in a breath of cold air as he found himself at a loss for words for a period of time. To defeat 6 star gods in an instant, this was 6 star gods, 6 star gods. Reap! The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations ripped space apart as it flew back into Jasmine's hands. Jasmine's pitch-black eyes were still firmly locked onto the 6 great star gods as she prepared to deliver them the finishing blow. But at this time, great roars shook the heaven as they surged up. The bodies of all 36 star god elders shone with dazzling starlight as their feet formed a star formation which firmly surrounded Jasmine. 36 star god elders, 36 supreme divine masters. It was a power that a normal divine profound practitioner would not be able to fathom even in 10 lifetimes. Don't hold back! The hoarse and guttural roar of the star god emperor rang out in the distance. His face was dreadfully dark, and the sword in his hand once more glowed with the light of 12 stars. He completely disregarded his own worsening injuries, and for the first time ever, the heavenly chief divine power was being crazily focused and accumulated without a care for the consequences. The heavenly poison had fallen, the heavenly aster had fallen, the heavenly origin had fallen, and the heavenly slaughter had transformed into the evil infant due to her rage. It was also impossible for the heavenly wolf to return to them any longer. The 12 star gods whose might and fame had once shocked the world, the most core cornerstones of the star god realm, were only left with 6 now, other than himself, and all of them had been severely wounded. This cluster of black light that had come from Jasmine was still spreading and devouring the star god realm at an extremely fast speed. It was unimaginable that this sacred ground, which was supreme and unsurpassed in the eastern divine region, or even the entire god realm, was currently being transformed into such a vision of hell. What an absurd and dreadful nightmare this was. He no longer bothered about the 6 heavily wounded star gods or anything else. He needed to use the limits of his god-emperor powers, no matter what the effort or cost, to smash Jasmine to death. If not, the star god realm would truly be destroyed, utterly destroyed. Starlight explosively flashed, and the star formation, which focused the power of 36 divine masters, unleashed a radiance that could destroy the heavens and the earth. A pillar of light pierced the darkness, pierced through the star god realm, and pierced through the blue dome of heaven. Most of the eastern divine region could see that line of white light explosively rise into the sky as it completely and utterly pierced both heaven and earth. However, this white light which pierced the heavens only lasted for that single flashing instant, as it was brutally severed after that. Even though Jasmine possessed an appearance that seemed like it would never grow up, her face was still flawless and extremely beautiful, so beautiful that Xianxia had never been able to forget the first time he saw her. Her red hair had turned black, and her blood-red eyes had turned black as well, while lines of pitch-black light wound around her snow-white skin. Yet nothing could cover up her extreme and flawless beauty. On the contrary, all of this had made her even more strangely beguiling and bewitching as several elements of danger and fear enhanced her appearance. Her small and delicate body danced together with the devil wheel in Xianxia's eyes. That would definitely have been the most beautiful figure in the world. But as she danced, she gathered up the most dreaded power in this universe. An enormous darkness devil domain was torn open in the middle of the star formation, which shone so brightly that its light filled the skies. With the devil domain at its center, countless black marks swiftly shot out as they filled the entire star formation. Before looks of terror and shock could even appear on the faces of the 36 elders, the vast star formation was torn to shreds as it was completely and utterly crushed. They still did not truly understand just how dreadful the current Jasmine was. Even the ceiling barrier that had connected and focused all of the power of the star gods, the star god elders, and a countless amount of profound crystals had been torn apart by her. So the star formation that they had laid down with all of their might was no stronger than a thin piece of paper in front of Jasmine. The collapse of the absolute star soul barrier had caused a backlash that still gnawed away at their bodies. Before the swiftly formed star formation they had created had even done anything, it had been torn to pieces by Jasmine, and the ensuing backlash that struck them again threw the profound auras of all 36 star god elders into complete and utter chaos. Their blood and energy flowed in reverse, but Jasmine had already generated a pitch-black scar of light as the bloodthirsty and ruthless demon wheel cruelly spun downwards. Pah! How could the body of a star god elder compare to the divine body of an actual star god? Once the demonic wheel smashed against him, a star god elder's body directly collapsed, pitch-black flesh and shattered bones spraying from his body amidst the black light. Black light flashed, and Jasmine had already appeared within another patch of darkness. Black light blossomed outwards from the devil wheel and instantly shattered the divine bodies of 3 star god elders, along with the divine power they had just managed to gather. Bang! A long rope made of star metal pierced towards Jasmine's back, but before it could even draw near to her, it had already broken apart. Jasmine did not turn around, but a large, pitch-black hand suddenly shot out from the darkness, grabbing up that star god elder. A heart-rending and terrifying wail of misery rang in the air, but his struggles did not even last for a single breath before he was completely pulped and mashed by that hand of darkness. Boom! Many beams of profound light shot toward Jasmine, but they only pierced a black shadow that had yet to fade away. In the air above them, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations carried a black light that could span the sky as it pressed down. as if it were a devil god that was opening a huge and abyssal mouth. A peal of terrified and shocked cries of misery rang out in the air as 4 star god elders were completely swallowed up by the darkness. Once the darkness had faded away, they had already been transformed into 4 sets of completely rotted and withered skeletons. God realm and every inch it spread meant that 1 more inch of the star God realm would have been converted into a hell of death. The despairing aura spread across the star God realm, and with every passing breath, an innumerable amount of living creatures were perishing within the black mist. Moreover, black light covered the skies above Star God City, which was at the center of the Star God realm. A dreadful power crazily wreaked havoc in one of the most sacred places within the eastern divine region. Layers of space were being shredded every single instant, and this rocked the entire Star God realm as the whole star region shook continuously. RMMBB? BOOM. Miserable cries filled the air as black blood spurted through the sky. Moreover, every cry of misery and every drop of blood had come from a Star God Elder, had come from one divine master after the other. Upon becoming a divine master, one would reign supreme for all the ages. To this very day, the God realm would still clearly record the name and location of every person who had become a divine master, because the divine master realm was the pinnacle of what humanity could achieve. It would allow them to rule over heaven and earth. It was the realm that was the closest to the divine for humanity. To possess this kind of power meant that one could overlook the entire universe and the living creatures within it. In just the time it took to wave one's hand, a divine master could extinguish 10,000 lives like mowing grass. However, today, these divine masters who proudly overlooked the star god realm were actually nothing but grass in front of Jasmine. Every time her wheel danced, every black beam of light would send them one after another, or even waves after waves of them, into the abyss of death. They had never known that their own strength and divine bodies could be so substandard and frail. They clearly possessed the highest level of power in this world. So how could they be so weak that they could not even withstand a single blow? How could they have practically no power to struggle or resist at all? None of this was real. It could not possibly be real. A nightmare. This was all a nightmare. Re-ip. A black tear pierced through 2 hearts which were already shaking so intensely that they were about to rupture. The bodies of 2 great star god elders exploded open from the chest, causing 2 showers of sickly black blood to scatter in the air. 36 star god elders. In the blink of an eye, 19 of them had already fallen. A total of 19 divine masters. The death of every divine master, even if they had died because of old age, was a momentous event that would shake an entire divine region. However, in this nightmare that had suddenly descended upon everyone, the star god realm's star gods and elders were no more than insects which had been crushed to death, as one divine master after the other met their tragic end. Yes, this was a nightmare. Today was the day that the Star God Emperor and the heavenly origin Star God had said was incomparably important. A day that would definitely be entered into the Star God divine canon and recorded in the annals of the God realm. Because today, the key factors for the ceremony, a ceremony that had been plotted and prepared for so long, had finally all been assembled and it could be perfectly started. At the same time, Jasmine and Kejai were also the heavenly slaughter Star God and the heavenly wolf Star God. Both of the princesses of the Star God realm had become star gods, allowing them to become perfect sacrifices for the ceremony. This was a gift from heaven. Even more than that, it was the protection of heaven. Since the Star God Emperor and the heavenly origin Star God had described it in this way, all of them had also believed it and acknowledged it as fact. Even if the heavenly slaughter and the heavenly wolf were to become tragic sacrifices, even if they had been reduced to tragic sacrifices by a despicable plot, if it would truly allow the Star God Emperor to attain power which neared that of a god, if it would allow the Star God realm to ascend to an even higher level, then they also did not feel like they did anything wrong, even though everything was just as Yun Chi had said it was, that it was something which directly went against the laws of heaven and human society. But in the end, what appeared before their eyes was not a gift bestowed by the heavens. Instead, it was a heavenly punishment, the most cruel and dreadful heavenly punishment in the history of the God realm. The starlight radiating from the Star God Emperor's body explosively flashed and pulsed. As the light that pulsed from the sword of the 12 heavenly stars in his hand grew more intense with every passing breath. The 6 star gods had been heavily injured, and the 36 elders were being brutally murdered one after the other. In the past, the death of any single one of them would have been an enormous loss that was hard to accept. But today, even though his heart bled, he remained motionless. Until this moment, when the starlight glowing on the sword finally solidified and grew fixed. The sword of the 12 heavenly stars was a true divine artifact that the star god realm possessed. Even though its starry might was far from what it was in the era of gods, it was still a true divine artifact that had been left behind by the ancestral star gods. It had also been every star god emperor's symbol of leadership and command over the star god realm. Just what did it mean for a god emperor to gather and focus his divine power for an entire 7 seconds? If one met it head-on, it was definitely enough to severely wound any one of the star gods in a single instant. Get back! As the star god emperor gave a great roar, starlight swirled around the sword of 12 heavenly stars as it pierced straight towards Jasmine. This was a blow that contained all of his power, and it was also the sword blow that he was putting all of his hopes on. The starlight that gleamed on the sword was the most dazzling starlight he had ever unleashed in his life. Starlight tore apart the darkness, tore apart space itself as it arrived in front of Jasmine and pierced towards her. Jasmine coldly turned around, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations smashing straight at it. CRACCKK? Starlight and darkness collided in midair, as if a heaven-splitting bolt of lightning had exploded downwards, instantly splitting the world in two. Half of it shone with a glaring starlight, the other half was dark and devoid of light. The space in an entire 5,000-kilometer radius around them instantly exploded, creating wild spatial currents which crashed about like wild and stormy waves. Moreover, in the boundary between light and darkness, at the center of the wild spatial currents, the sword of the 12 heavenly stars was deadlocked with the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. It was just that Jasmine's face was cold and expressionless, while the star god emperor, on the other hand, had blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Both his eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to burst, and both his arms were faintly trembling. The power that he had gathered and accumulated for an entire 7 breaths actually had not even been able to push Jasmine back a single step. Even in the current muddy and turbid world, even if the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had not even recovered a billionth of its power, its dreadfulness was still something that today's mortals would not be able to fathom or understand. Jasmine! The star god emperor's gaze was pleading as he gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Your father knows that. He hasn't treated you right, and you can hack me to pieces for that. But this place is the place where you were born and raised, the star god realm that gave you the power of the heavenly slaughter star god. It was built up from the blood, sweat and tears of generations of our ancestors. Do you truly want to destroy it? CRACK. The god emperor's words did not cause even a single ripple in Jasmine's delicate face or black eyes. The only thing that answered him was a cracking sound that nearly tore his heart to shreds. A pitch-black crack appeared in the place where the sword of the 12 heavenly stars had struck the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, and it slowly spread across the entire body of the sword. The star god emperor's already bulging eyeballs instantly became bloodshot. The sword of the 12 heavenly stars was the only divine artifact the star god realm possessed. It was a god emperor among artifacts, powerful enough to cause all the artifacts in the universe to bow before it. But what sort of existence was the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations? In the primordial era of gods, even though it was an artifact, its status in the primal chaos was still slightly higher than that of the creation gods and the devil emperors. Even though the sword of the 12 heavenly stars was an artifact left behind by the gods, it did not even have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath as the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. Crack, yet another black crack appeared on the body of the sword. The sword of the 12 heavenly stars started to shake, and it seemed to be letting out a mournful cry that bordered on despair. The starlight that had been deadlocked with the darkness for a short period of time also started to swiftly and suddenly die down at this moment. After that, it was swallowed up by the darkness which broke it down layer by layer. Jasmine, you, ARGGHHHHH? The third crack appeared, and the flesh of the star god emperor's right arm also split open at this moment. After the darkness had crushed the starlight, his body had started to be pushed back step by step, and every step he retreated caused the starlight to grow even dimmer. The mournful wails of the sword of the 12 heavenly stars also grew more and more shrill. While Jasmine's eyes remained so cold and detached, that they practically seemed to be empty, looking just like twin abysses of despair which would devour everything. "What are you waiting for?" The eternal heaven god emperor finally could not keep his composure. With a low roar, he began to swoop down towards the star god emperor. "Wait a moment." The Brahma heaven god emperor stretched out his hand, but he was already unable to stop the eternal heaven god emperor. "That won't do. We can't wait for them any longer," the moon god emperor said in a deep voice. "The dreadfulness of the evil infant has surpassed all our imaginations. This is no longer a calamity of the star god realm. This is a calamity of the eastern divine region. Half of the star god realm already lies in tatters. If the star god emperor dies, we will lose a very important power that can fight this calamity." If there was a person who most wished for the star god emperor's death in the god realm, it would undoubtedly be the moon god emperor. But even as his voice fell, he was already rushing downwards, a deep purple moonlight radiating blooming from his body. The evil infant's power has only recovered by a mere fraction, so the more it uses, the less it will have left. At that time, just as the Brahma heaven god emperor had finished speaking, the moon god emperor's figure had already entered a purple moon. His expression fluctuated for a while, but he finally decided to follow tightly behind them. The star god emperor retreated step by step, and no matter whether it was his power or his will, both of these things were gradually inching towards the edge of collapse. But it was at this moment that a low chant that shook the heart and soul rang out in the skies above, a cry that rang out above the spatial storm that raged in the air. "Die, defier of the heavens! All evil be returned to nothing." This low chant jolted the star god emperor's spirit as he let out a joyous cry, "Eternal heaven!" The light that had already grown dim and gloomy grew even dimmer at this moment. In the distant skies above, a gigantic hand that could cover the heavens was directly hurtling downward. Boom! The ground of the entire star god city sank by nearly 3 meters in a single instant. Jasmine stopped her forward advance as her body fiercely sank. The powers of the two great god emperors, the star god emperor and the eternal heaven god emperor, pressed down on the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations together, causing Jasmine to sink even faster as she was being suppressed. But this suppression only lasted for a single breath. Jasmine's figure halted in midair, and she fiercely thrust out an arm to greet the power of the two god emperors. Boom! The star god emperor's entire body shook violently as he spat out a large mouthful of blood that had flowed in reverse. 3 more cracks split open on the body of the sword of the 12 heavenly stars simultaneously, as similar cracks also appeared on the gigantic hand that appeared from the skies above. In a single instant, these cracks spread to the 5 fingers of this gigantic hand, causing a shocked expression to appear on the face of the eternal heaven god emperor, who was still in the distant skies above. But at this time, the light in the sky changed yet again. The moon god emperor held the Xianxia divine sword in his hand, and the moonlight radiating from his entire body dazzled the skies. It was as if a bright moon had descended from the heavens to fall towards a world of darkness. Boom! The star god emperor, the eternal heaven god emperor, and the moon god emperor, the power of all 3 of these god emperors erupted at the same time. In a single instant, the heavily injured star gods and the star god elders who had the fortune to survive all of these supreme divine masters were blown away by a gigantic force that even they could not resist or defend against. The star god city, which had become a battlefield, completely sank down, and all of the primordial profound formations were destroyed as they toppled over and collapsed. The 12 star god palaces, which had been on the verge of collapse, were finally reduced to dust, and the collapse of the internal pocket dimensions within each of them began to stir up spatial storms which intertwined with one another. Spatial storms were already something that were peerlessly terrifying, but under the power of 3 god emperors, and under the power of the world-destroying devil wheel, which was even more terrifying than the power of these 3 god emperors, it was actually rather insignificant. The power of 3 god emperors combined as they pressed down against the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations together. They had definitely never dreamed that there would actually be an existence in this universe that would require all 3 of them to join hands with one another. What was even more terrifying than that was that the other party had not been defeated in a single blow, despite the 3 god emperors combining their powers. In fact, the other party had not even been suppressed at all. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations released a heaven-devouring black light. and Jasmine's small and delicate body seemed to have been frozen in place by the power of three great god emperors. But she did not retreat even a step. It was in that instant when the spatial storms had just started to rage, when the figure of the Brahma heaven god emperor slipped through a crack in space behind Jasmine, and a golden light pierced the space as it thrust forward, striking Jasmine in the back. Jasmine's body faintly shuddered, and that golden light paused for a single instant upon touching her back, before directly piercing through her devil body. Blood mist erupted from Jasmine's mouth and sprayed on the devil wheel in her hand. Her face darkened, and the devilish markings on her body shone intensely, as the evil infant's shrill and enraged scream rang out in the peaks of the darkened sky. Under the blood mist that had spewed out of Jasmine's mouth, a black light that could devour everything erupted out of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, as an incomparably gigantic image of the wheel appeared in the skies, covering the four god emperors, and the king realm that had been pulled into an incomparable calamity. Great shock appeared in the hearts of all four god emperors, and it was at this moment that their god emperor powers crazily surged up, causing the four strongest powers in the eastern divine region to flare up at the same time. BOOOZZN. Amidst an explosive detonation which engulfed everything, the skies of the star god realm had completely exploded. A pitch-black abyss which started from Star God City began to split all the way to the ends of the Star God Realm, splitting the entire vast Star God Realm in half. A cosmic storm, the most terrible disaster known to all living creatures, began to wildly and crazily stir up inside the star region where the Star God Realm was located. God Realm would be filled with stars all year round. In the eyes of the world, it was a true sacred land that was protected by all the stars in the sky. The starlight was flawless, and every inch of space within the star god realm was more beautiful than could be imagined, as beautiful as a celestial realm. But right now, from a distance, the stars that had been shining since ancient times had now been engulfed by darkness, and a black crack clearly ran through the middle of the entire star god realm. On the borders of the distant star region, one could still faintly hear the countless shrill and mournful wails that nearly tore apart the heavens and the earth. No one knew, and no one would dare to even believe, that due to this black mist and crack, a full 70% of the living creatures in the star god realm had perished. Furthermore, this number was still explosively increasing, and it was not slowing down. The instant Jasmine's rage and the powers of the star god emperor, moon god emperor, eternal heaven god emperor, and the Brahma god emperor erupted, it was enough to destroy heaven and earth. The entire world was torn into 5 domains of destructions by these 5 world-shaking powers. Amidst this crumbling world, these 5 domains of destruction started to distort at the same time, and the other 4 domains started to merge together as they were drawn towards a black space. BOOOMCRACK. The already crumbling world sunk in once more, and following that, extremely dreadful spatial storms ripped themselves into existence across every corner of this world. Run! The remaining star god elders all used starlight to protect their bodies as they swiftly fled from the world that had nearly been entirely engulfed in calamity. That was right, they were fleeing. Because this was already a vicious fight they could no longer affect. It was also a vicious fight that they no longer had the qualifications to participate in. Divine masters represented the limits of humanity's power. Did there exist a battle in this universe that they did not have the right to participate in? If it was before the events of today, no one would ever believe that. Even the star god elders themselves would throw their heads back in uproarious laughter. It would be as if they had heard the most ridiculous and absurd joke in the universe. Yet such a vicious battle had indeed appeared. The 4 god emperors of the eastern divine region were combining their powers to fight one opponent. A scene that had never occurred before in history had now appeared before their very eyes. It had appeared in the star god realm, and that power, which was enough to rend the heavens and the earth and bury even the void itself, was enough to extinguish them in a brief moment. The power that was erupting and exploding at every instant told them that this was an unprecedentedly vicious battle, that an early stage or even a mid-stage divine master had no right to participate in or even get close to. The 6-star god were also blasted into the distance. They desperately struggled to not lose consciousness as they dumbly stared at the world in front of them, their eyes, hearts, and souls completely dazed by what they saw. Boom. 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 The power that erupted every second caused these divine masters to shake in fear and terror. The star god realm itself was violently shaking with every second that passed. The other three god emperors had arrived together, causing hope to burn anew in the heart of the despairing star god emperor. Power that exceeded his limits was forcefully blasted out of his body due to this. But as his wounds swiftly grew even more aggravated, his reignited hope gradually began to slide towards despair. The moon god emperor, the star god emperor, and the Brahma god emperor. All of them had just personally witnessed the evil infant's might, and they had long ago realized what they were facing. But at this moment, when they were personally squaring off against the evil infant's power, each was more shocked than the next. The power of three god emperors had suppressed the evil infant's power for a short while, and the Brahma heaven god emperor had even successfully managed to wound Jasmine with a sneak attack. But her power did not weaken at all because of that. Instead, it was erupting forth with a fury that could shake the heavens. The combined power of four god emperors, a power that had never been seen before in the history of the god realm, a power that the people of the world would not be able to imagine even after 100 lifetimes, was being blasted to bits again and again by the demonic wheel in Jasmine's hand. The faces of the four god emperors had gone dark, and every time they unleashed their power, it was at full force. Every time their powers erupted, its heavenly might was enough to shock the world, and the king realm known as the star god realm was slowly being buried. But they were basically unable to suppress the Jasmine, who was the focus of the attacks from the four god emperors. On the contrary, they were gradually beginning to feel unbearable pain due to the sky-spanning devilish might that erupted from her body. They were the four god emperors of the Eastern Divine Region. An alliance that had never appeared before now was actually still unable to suppress the recently awakened evil infant. Boom! B-O-O-O-M-M. Two black vortexes swirled into being, and they contracted for an instant before fiercely exploding apart. It was as if two dark suns had ruptured and exploded in the sky. Under the devilish light that was far too dreadful, the four god emperors all gave up on defending as hoarse roars ripped out from their throats. In the end, they were still all blasted very far away. Blood trickled down the corner of the eternal heaven god emperor's mouth. After that, lines of blood trickled out from his ears, his nostrils, and the corners of his eyes. Only a bit of the darkness, malicious energy had invaded his body, but it already caused his god emperor body to feel unbearable pain. As he looked at the young girl who was standing in the middle of the distant darkness, a ghastly feeling that bored straight into his bone marrow spread across his entire body. Just what exactly had the star god realm done when they had isolated themselves from the world? Why was the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations on the heavenly slaughter star god's person? Since it was the heavenly slaughter star god, why did she want to bathe the entire star god realm in blood? All of these doubts and suspicions were heavier than the next. But right now, they were already no longer important, because at this moment, they were facing the most terrifying existence that had emerged since the era of gods had ended. They could no longer hold anything back. Star god and moon god, please hold her in place. The eternal heaven god emperor gave a loud roar. Both of his arms opened wide and a green light flashed in front of him. After that, a gigantic cauldron that was 330 meters high appeared in front of him. Brahma heaven, assist me. The four god emperors had known each other for more than 10,000 years, so even though they all did not get along, they were all exceptionally familiar with each other. The star god emperor and the moon god emperor did not voice any doubt as starlight and moonlight shone simultaneously. Starlight and moonlight interlaced as it ripped apart the darkness. Xing Jiukong and Yue Wuya, these two people who had countless resentments and grievances against one another. These two people who hated each other. This was the first time they had ever fought shoulder to shoulder in battle. The eternal heaven god emperor's hand stroked the giant cauldron, and the body of cauldron began faintly flickering with a small green light. The Brahma heaven god emperor flashed to the side of the eternal heaven god emperor. He did not even need to ask a single question. He sheathed his golden sword as his hands twirled and traced a profound art before he spat a mouthful of golden blood on the surface of the green cauldron. Golden-colored blood droplets. This was the Brahma heaven god emperor's blood essence. As the head of the four god emperors of the Eastern Divine Region, there was absolutely no one in the Eastern Divine Region who was worthy of him wounding his own blood essence. But after personally experiencing how terrifying the evil infant was, he had offered up this mouthful of golden blood essence without the slightest bit of hesitation. He stretched out his hand and pressed it against the green cauldron together with the eternal heaven god emperor. A golden-colored diagram slowly appeared on his palm, and as he stretched it out, it directly spread out and covered the entire body of the cauldron. RMMBB? WA? What are you waiting for? Ah! The combined power of the four god emperors had barely held Jasmine in check, so with only the star god emperor and the moon god emperor joining hands, they had already started to be beaten back after a few short breaths, and they were besieged by danger from every side. Most of the deep purple moonlight that radiated from the moon god emperor's body had already been dissipated, while the sword of the 12 heavenly stars, that was held in the star god emperor's hand, had finally been completely smashed apart. Fresh blood wildly flew from his mouth, and he was sent flying through the darkness before immediately being sucked into a flowing eddy of darkness. But at this moment, the eyes of the eternal heaven god emperor and the Brahma heaven god emperor shone brilliantly, and at the same time they let out a heaven-shattering roar. The green cauldron started rolling, producing sounds like rumbling thunder as it directly smashed towards Jasmine. It did not seem to be moving fast at all, but all of the spatial storms strangely came to a halt at this moment. When the green cauldron finally drew near to her, a clear sluggishness could be seen in Jasmine's movements, because the space where she was floating also been fixed in place by a vast and boundless power. BZZZZBOO. The green cauldron heavily smashed against the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, an all-encompassing light radiating out from the gigantic body of the cauldron. Jasmine's entire body shook violently as she was instantly blasted tens of kilometers backwards. Black light flashed in her eyes, and the devil wheel let out a shrill hiss. In the exact same instant, the green cauldron suddenly shone with a golden light, and a gigantic golden-colored diagram appeared atop its surface. Jasmine's body violently shook as if the dome of heaven itself had pressed down on her, blood mist wildly spraying from her mouth. Ha! The eternal heaven god emperor and the Brahma heaven god emperor tore space as they shot forward. Both their hands smashed against the green cauldron, causing the light that radiated from the green cauldron and golden diagram to flourish even more. Immediately, the devil wheel's black light was completely extinguished, and yet another mouthful of blood mist sprayed from Jasmine. The dark light in her eyes dispersed in that instant, and she was sent flying like a withered leaf. The eternal heaven god emperor flipped his hand, and the green cauldron suddenly plunged down towards Jasmine. The pitch-black mouth of the cauldron seemed to be like a boundless black hole that could swallow up the sun and moon. Instantly engulfed Jasmine, who was flying as she sprayed blood into the air, and the devil wheel in an instant. The golden diagram shifted upwards and tightly sealed the mouth of the cauldron. "We've done it!" The eternal heaven god emperor let out an excited roar, but he did not dare to delay his movements or profound power for even an instant. He dived directly towards the green cauldron while shouting, "She's been sealed inside the cauldron, hurry up!" As his voice fell, his arms heavily smashed against the surface of the green cauldron with the power of a god emperor, the erupting power instantly shattering the empty space in a 5,000-kilometer radius around him. BOOM! The Brahma heaven god emperor was hot on his heels, and as his power smashed into the green cauldron as well, causing a sky-covering golden light to erupt from the body of the cauldron. In the next instant, the star god emperor and the moon god emperor had also flashed next to the cauldron. All four god emperors stood in four different positions as they unreservedly exploded power into the green cauldron, power that stood at the pinnacle of the current universe. This cauldron's name was the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron, and it was the artifact bequeathed by the gods to the eternal heaven god realm. Not only did it have the power to capsize stars and destroy the wilderness, its interior also contained a destruction dimension. It could suppress and destroy everything it swallowed up. The power that was being smashed into the body of the cauldron could also be transformed into destructive power that could be used by the internal dimension of the cauldron. The moment one was sealed inside, it was certain death and one would never be able to see the sun again. Boom, 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 the power of the four god emperors crazily erupted. Even if Jasmine had already been heavily wounded and had been sealed into the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron, they still did not dare to hold anything back. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 5 breaths, 10 breaths. Every single breath, it seemed as if 10,000 lightning bolts were striking the sky at the same time. Without the evil infant's power, the black light which covered the sky quickly dissipated. Finally, following the last eruption of the four god emperors' power, some semblance of silence finally returned to the world. Only the spatial storms continued to wantonly rage and swirl, and it was a long time before they started to die out. The wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron was completely silent, and the faint green light flickering around it was barely visible. Who? The eternal heaven god emperor lowered his palm and heavily gasped for breath, a heavy feeling of exhaustion running through his entire body. We were fortunate that Brother Eternal Heaven had carried the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron with him. If not, the Brahma heaven god emperor was also heavily gasping. As the darkness was dissipating more and more quickly, the star god realm could finally see the light of day again. But the collapsed star region, the living creatures who had perished, these were things that could never be recovered. The heavenly slaughter star god is definitely dead, but there is no way that the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations has been destroyed. As such, the only method we have left is to forever seal it inside the cauldron and never let it emerge in the world again, the moon god emperor said between rough gasps for air. The eternal heaven god emperor nodded his head. The nightmare had finally ended, but the star god emperor did not look the least bit joyous. He slowly sank down to his knees as he dazedly stared at the ruined and destroyed world in front of him. He was unable to form any words, and he remained completely dazed and dispirited for a long time. Star God Emperor, just what exactly happened here? The Brahma Heaven God Emperor probed. The Star God Emperor did not reply. Forget it. As he stared at the Star God Realm's terrible state, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor gave a heavy sigh before he said, "The evil infant has been destroyed and the calamity has been resolved. As for the rest, we can speak of it at a later time. Star God Emperor, you now?" Crack. A faint fracturing sound exploded like a thunderclap in the ears of everyone. The eyes of the three God Emperors jumped at the same time, and even the dazed Star God Emperor jerked his head upwards. Because this faint fracturing sound had actually come from the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron. "Wah, what is going on?" the Moon God Emperor said in a shaky voice. But before his voice had even finished falling, the pupils of his eyes dilated so much in an instant that it seemed like they were about to burst open. CRAA, CCCCCCKKKKKK. If one were to say that the previous fracturing sound was as light as the chirping of an ant, so soft that one could almost think they had misheard it, then the fracturing sound that rang out right now shook the ears like the sound of 10,000 worlds collapsing. A pitch-black line exploded out on the bottom of the green cauldron. After that, like a bolt of sky-shattering lightning, it spread across the 330-meter body of the cauldron. "Wah, what?" the Eternal Heaven God Emperor cried out involuntarily in shock and fear. But his reaction was also extremely fast as his God Emperor power instantly surged up. Everything was still already too late by then. BZZZZBOO, ma'am. A nightmarish black light shot out from between the cracks of the cauldron, piercing through the horizon. As explosive black light flashed across the 330-meter cauldron, it explosively detonated before the utterly shocked eyes of the four God Emperors. The scene of destruction that exploded into life in front of them fiercely blasted away the four God Emperors, who had just started to relax for a few breaths. The wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron was linked to the life of the Eternal Heaven God Emperor. If the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron was destroyed, it would severely damage the lifeline of the Eternal Heaven God Emperor. His vision went black, and his entire body went limp, blood spurting from all 7 orifices at the same time. Jasmine's peerlessly bewitching and strange figure appeared within his colorless eyes. Her entire body was covered in blood, and she still held the devil wheel in her hand. Her face remained utterly cold, detached, and expressionless, but the black light in her eyes had already transformed into 2 pitch-black flames. "No, no, it's not possible, it's not possible." The Eternal Heaven God Emperor had grown completely dispirited and dazed. Like the Star God Emperor, he had also fallen into a nightmarish abyss. The wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron, a true and genuine artifact left behind by the gods, was an existence that could not be destroyed by any power or profound artifact in this universe. Even if it was another God Emperor who held an artifact left behind by the gods, they would also be unable to leave even a scratch on it. But Jasmine was holding the #1 demonic artifact in the entire primal chaos, a demonic artifact that even the primordial gods and devils feared. What kind of existence was the Eternal Heaven God Emperor? In this world, there was nothing that could ever shock him so much that it would completely dumbfound him. Until today. The head of the four god emperors, the Brahma heaven god emperor, had also gone entirely stiff. It was as if he had seen a ghost god. No, the young girl in front of him was clearly millions of times more terrifying than any ghost god. Black energy once again blocked out the sun and covered the skies, and the sobbing laughter of the evil infant once more resounded in the ears of everyone present, even more enraged and shrill than it had been before. Jasmine raised her arm up, and a vortex of darkness started to swirl around the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations before the shocked gazes of the four god emperors. A black tear ripped space apart as it tore towards the eternal heaven god emperor. The eternal heaven god emperor actually remained motionless. Shock flashed in the moon god emperor's eyes, and the purple-tower divine sword in his hand radiated purple light as a purple-colored moon domain erupted from it. From a distance, it looked as if a purple moon was hurtling down from the vault of heaven towards the dark demonic wheel with a furious roar that shook the skies. BOOM. The purple-colored moon domain was instantly cleaved in half by the dark demonic wheel. The purple-tower divine sword flew out of the moon god emperor's hand, and he was also sent flying far away. The ripples of energy causing the Brahma heaven god emperor and the star god emperor to feel as if 10,000 mountains had crashed against their bodies as they were blasted backwards several hundred kilometers. In the middle of the domain of black light, Jasmine did not pursue immediately. Her figure blurred, and she sharply descended from the sky. She plunged for more than 300 meters before she came to a halt. The black light radiated by the devil wheel also appeared to be distorted and in flux. She had first been injured by the Brahma heaven god emperor, and after that she had been seriously wounded by the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron. She had finally destroyed the wilderness-suppressing divine cauldron, but she had also exhausted a large amount of energy, and her body was riddled with injuries. Only her rage, hatred, and resentment had not dampened or lessened in the slightest. She raised her head and her eyes came into contact with the moon god emperor. In an instant, the black flames in her eyes became incomparably fierce and intense. The moon god emperor, he had forced her mother to her death. He had nearly caused the death of her brother as well. He had been the person who had been the target of all her hatred and killing intent. It was also this person who had birthed the boundless killing intent, hatred, and resentment that had pushed her into becoming the heavenly slaughter star god. It was a person that she absolutely had to kill in this life. The already incomparably intense hatred and resentment burned even more fiercely as Jasmine rushed toward the moon god emperor. The long distance between them was instantly closed as a beam of black light flashed through the air, and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations exploded towards the startled moon god emperor with a cruel destructive power. Devilish pressure engulfed his body, and the evil energy drove a spike of dread into his heart. The moon god emperor felt as if he had been sealed into devilish eyes of some devil, and that there was no escape available to him. The four of them had surrounded Jasmine, but they barely held on for only a short amount of time. Since he was now facing her by himself, he practically did not have any strength to resist her. Bang, 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 boom. The moon world he unleashed with all of his might only barely managed to block 4 of Jasmine's attacks. But on the 5th attack, the moon world collapsed, and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations smashed directly into his solar plexus, causing an abyssal devilish light to explode from his chest. OOOOPH? Pain crossed the moon god emperor's face, and he was sent hurtling down. But Jasmine pressed the attack the very next instant, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations smashing downward once more. The moon god emperor's eyes widened dramatically, and a purple light flashed in his hand. He once more summoned the purple-tower divine sword to him and chopped down with all his might. SZZZ. The purple-colored moonlight collapsed like a shattered lightning bolt as the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations smashed aside the purple-tower divine sword, and once again smashed into the moon god emperor's solar plexus. The moon god emperor's eyes bulged, but he did not try to forcefully flee. Instead, his arm abruptly thrust out, and a beam of purple light burst out of the tip of his sword, causing a deep purple moon domain to explode against Jasmine's chest. BAANG? Blood sprayed out of the moon god emperor's body as he fell. Jasmine's body also flipped in midair, her face suddenly going ghastly white for an instant. But after that, she dove down at a peerlessly terrifying speed, the pitch-black flames in her eyes causing the pupils of the moon god emperor's own eyes to swiftly dilate. Crash, the purpletower divine sword was once again smashed flying as the blades of the devil wheel, with black light swirling around them, ripped apart the last protective profound energy on his body, ripped open his god-emperor body, and sank into him, causing a huge shower of blood to explode from his chest. Every drop of blood was a startling and ghastly-looking sickly black color. The moon god emperor's features twisted up, and his arm turned to purple crystal as he used a power that bordered on the edge of despair to blast aside Jasmine and that demonic wheel, however. Before he even had a chance to catch his breath, the nightmarish black light exploded forth once more. Rip, R-I-P-P-P-P, C-R-A-S-C-K. The rotating pitch-black wheel blades crazily carved into the moon god emperor's body, ripping open one pitch-black bloody groove after another on his body. They ravaged and destroyed his flesh, blood, tendons, veins, bones, and internal organs, amid a ripping sound that would cause anyone's heart to convulse and spasm. Flying black blood fell like torrential rain as a god emperor was being cruelly dragged towards the abyss of death. The eternal heaven god emperor forcefully suppressed his wounds and swiftly rushed forward. An invisible giant palm pierced through the void and heavily smacked into Jasmine's body. Jasmine let out a soft cry as she was sent plummeting toward the ground like a meteor. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations in her hand abruptly shot out, drawing a pitch-black arc in the air as it spun towards the moon god emperor and directly smashed into his already bloody and mangled front. The wheel blades pierced through him and caused black light to erupt out his back, once again generating a shower of blood that had been corroded by the darkness. Arg, G-H-H-H-H. The light in the moon god emperor's eyes dissipated. His mouth fell open, but the only thing that came out was an incomparably weak and hoarse wheezing. He sensed his consciousness swiftly going blurry, and in the corner of his eyes, he seemed to spy a few familiar clusters of moonlight, while his ears seemed to be hearing loud roars that seemed to be coming from such a far distance that they were hard to make out. Lord God Emperor! In the western skies, 9 clusters of different but still incomparably dense moonlight swiftly drew near, and every one of these clusters of moonlight were the symbols of a moon god. After they had arrived in the star god realm, they had desperately chased after their god emperor with all their might, even as shock shook their hearts and souls. But when they arrived, what they saw was the scene of the demonic wheel piercing through the moon god emperor's body as showers of blood sprayed in the air. The shock and alarm that assaulted them in that instant was no less than the shock they would have experienced if the heavens and earth had collapsed. The golden moon god, the moon god who possessed the greatest speed, Yue Wuji hurtled explosively through the air, catching the moon god emperor in his arms. The moment he laid his eyes on the moon god emperor, he was so shocked that his heart nearly stopped. The moon god emperor's chest had already been completely pierced through and blown apart. The supreme divine body of a god emperor had actually been reduced to a pile of pitch-black rotten flesh, and the blood that flowed onto his hand was also a dreadful scarlet-black color. God Emperor! Yue Wuji's hands shook as he barely managed to produce an extremely rough-sounding sound. "Don't bother with me," the moon god emperor said in a weak voice. With the dreadful wounds that he had sustained and the devilish energy that had invaded his body, if he was not the moon god emperor, he would have long ago died 10,000 times over. Swiftly kill the evil infant. As he said those words, the devilish energy assaulted his heart and he fainted dead away. No, his heart had already been smashed to bits, and it was only the purpletower divine power that had followed him for tens of thousands of years that stubbornly supported and clung onto his last bit of life force and consciousness. Yue Wuji's palm swept down, and a cluster of golden moonlight engulfed the moon god emperor. Half of the reason was to ensure that he did not die. The other half was because he did not dare let the other moon gods see the moon god emperor in his current miserable state. He turned his head and roared loudly, "Leave this side to me. The god emperor has issued his order, swiftly kill the evil infant at all costs." The attention of the other 8 moon gods was instantly diverted. Over at the other side, the eternal heaven god emperor and the Brahma heaven god emperor had already restarted the battle with Jasmine, heavenly might shocking the world at every instant. Multiple auras swiftly drew near from the northern and southern skies. Every single aura was incomparably strong. Furthermore, every single one of these auras was an aura that the moon gods were incomparably familiar with. "It's the eternal heaven's guardians. 11 of them have come," the lead moon god said in a deep voice, but just as his voice fell, his expression faintly changed again. Over on the other side, the Brahma monarch god realms Brahma gods and Brahma kings have come, and all three of the Brahma gods have come. Do not be distracted. Advance. The miserable state of the star god realm was a horrible and shocking sight, but right now, there was no room for them to ask even a single question. 8 moon gods radiated moonlight, and they looked like 8 bright moon that were streaking through the sky as they attacked Jasmine together. The 8 moon gods attacked at the same time. The might that issued from their hands was vast and boundless. Countless moon domains and moon formations smashed toward Jasmine from different directions, and it was as if a violent stormy hurricane had explosively landed on Jasmine's body. When the eternal heaven god emperor could finally catch a breath, both of his hands joined together, his expression solemn and grave. A soft and clear whistle issued from his lips, and a green light radiated from his hands. After that, he pierced through the void in an instant and smashed directly into Jasmine. Crack! Sizzz! A globe of black light exploded in midair, tearing apart all of the moon domains and the moon formations. This scene was so shocking that it caused the expressions of all 8 moon gods to abruptly change, and they were scarcely able to believe their own eyes. But it was also in that instant that the eternal heaven god emperor's hand, a hand which radiated green light, directly smashed into Jasmine's back. Poof! Jasmine's entire body shook intensely as she fiercely spat out a mouthful of black blood. But for some bizarre reason, she had not been pushed back a single step. Instead, she slowly turned around, her eyes burning with a black light, nearly causing the distinguished eternal heaven god emperor's guts and soul to be burned to ashes. Boom! The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations viciously smashed into the eternal heaven god emperor's chest. Devilish energy burst forth like water from a breached dam as it crazily surged into the eternal heaven god emperor's body. His eyes went wide as his face, and his entire body swiftly gained a grayish-black sheen. After that, he directly plummeted towards the ground like a wooden doll with no will of its own. My lord! My lord! Just like the moon gods, when the eternal heaven's guardians had finally arrived, they witnessed a scene that very nearly shocked them to death. RMMBB. Space was being pierced through with far too much intensity, as several guardians crazily rushed toward the eternal heaven god emperor, leaving spatial explosions that sounded like claps of thunder in their wake. They caught the eternal heaven god emperor, but when they came into contact with him, he felt so cold that it felt like they were touching a corpse that had been buried in an icy hell for 1,000 years. Don't bother about me. The eternal heaven god emperor's complexion was so gray and dark that it was frightening, but he struggled to continue speaking. That is the evil infant. She is already heavily wounded, and her power is not as great as it was before. You need to eliminate her at all costs. If not, it will be a serious problem in the future. Before the eternal heaven god emperor could finish speaking, a mouthful of nearly pitch-black fresh blood wildly spewed from his mouth. My lord, please do not worry. We will definitely not shame you, the guardian said as they sobbed. The moon god emperor had lost consciousness, and one did not know whether he was dead or alive. The star god emperor had fallen to the ground, his entire body stained in blood, and he looked as if he no longer had the power to continue fighting. The eternal heaven god emperor had sustained extremely serious injuries all over his body. One could not imagine just how great a price they had paid in order to reduce the evil infant to her current state. The 11 guardians all turned their heads. In the distant skies above, the Brahma heaven god emperor and the 8 moon gods were combining their powers as they engaged in a vicious battle with the evil infant. But even though the eternal heaven god emperor had said that the evil infant had been heavily wounded and that her power was not as great as it was before, she was still so dreadful that they could scarcely believe their own eyes. Every beam of moonlight released by the moon gods, who possessed power equivalent to theirs, contained enough power to engulf an entire vast star realm. But at this moment, the moon domains that a whole 8 moon gods had opened together with all of their might had actually been suppressed by the explosively flashing black light so heavily that they had grown incomparably dim. So dim that it seemed as if they were about to go out. SSSSSSSSSSSSSSS? With an explosive ring, the profound lights of 3 moon gods dissipated, and they flew away, blood spraying through the air. It was also at this instant that 10 of the guardians split the air as they soared up to join the fight, leaving one guardian to protect the eternal heaven god emperor. RUMMBB? The sky that had already been riddled by countless tears once again split open. Everyone had already forgotten that this was the star god realm, or perhaps it was better to say that no one would believe that this place was actually the star god realm. 1 god emperor, 8 moon gods, and 10 guardians. This was a dreadful line-up, but every single one of these people wore dark and heavy expressions on their faces. Wild hisses came from their mouths as they used all their power to crazily suppress, seal, and assault the evil infant. Not a single one of them dared to hold back in the slightest. However, this bitter and desperate struggle did not continue for too long. As half of the sky started to sink, another world-shocking power surged up and directly covered the evil infant. 7 Brahma kings had arrived from the Brahma monarch realm, even though only half of the 15 Brahma kings had arrived. What caused everyone to be greatly shocked was that the aura of the Brahma monarch 3 Brahma gods had, astonishingly enough, appeared right after the 7 Brahma kings. Even though no one had publicly announced it before, every profound practitioner in the Eastern Divine region knew this in their hearts. The Brahma monarch 3 Brahma gods were just above the Brahma kings, star gods, and moon gods in terms of status within the Eastern Divine region. The title of God Emperor not only symbolized that one was a realm king of one of the king realms, it was also the symbol of another level of power, the power of a level 10 divine master. It was also the pinnacle that a divine master could reach, a supreme ruler among rulers. Among the 4 king realms of the Eastern Divine region, both the Star God realm and the Moon God realm only had 1 level 10 divine master apiece, and that was Star God Emperor Xing Jukang and Moon God Emperor Yue Wuya respectively. The Eternal Heaven God realm had 2 such people, Eternal Heaven God Emperor Zhou Zuzi and the head of the Guardians, Honorable Tai Yu. But the Brahma Monarch God realm had a whole 5 people, Brahma Heaven God Emperor Qianai Fanshan, Brahma Monarch Goddess Qianai Yinger, and the Brahma Monarch 3 Brahma gods. When it came to level 10 divine masters, the power on the level of a God Emperor. Just 1 Brahma Monarch God realm had more of these people than the other 3 king realms in the Eastern Divine region put together. Just based on this point alone, it was already undoubtedly and deservedly the head of the 4 king realms in the Eastern Divine region. Black light radiated from every part of Jasmine's body. Her face was cold, detached, and expressionless. One could not find any emotions or feelings on it, as though she was a puppet whose soul had been abducted. But in reality, she was incomparably conscious and aware of what she was doing. In fact, she was more clear-headed now than she had been at any other point in her life. She knew who she was, she knew where she was, she knew what sort of power was surging through her body. Moreover, she was even more aware of what she was doing, what people she was facing, what people she was killing, and she could clearly see what kind of hell the Star God realm had transformed into because of her devil wheel. She did not stop, did not hesitate, and even more than that, she did not regret. Because her world had already completely collapsed, and there could no longer be any color in it from now onward. The 4 God Emperors, the Star Gods, the Moon Gods, the Guardians, the Brahma Gods, and Brahma Kings. Now that all of these powerhouses, who were like present-day gods, had all gathered here, she knew that she would definitely be buried in this place today. Even if she was not killed by them, she would also end herself. She definitely would not allow Yun Qi to walk the road to the Yellow Springs by himself. They would go to heaven together, descend to hell together, venture towards reincarnation together. It was just that, before all of this happened, she wanted to take these star god lands that had buried him and take these lives and fresh blood that were the most precious in the Eastern Divine region, and bury them together with him. Devilish light, black spatial tears, devilish mist. The world was collapsing and being torn apart again and again. Furthermore, the bodies of these supreme powerhouses, bodies which were supposed to be the hardest existences to damage in this universe, would definitely be wounded by the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations whenever they came into contact with each other. Every time that demonic wheel danced, it would definitely paint the sky with showers of black blood. Rip, the body of a moon god was instantly cut in half by a black tear in space. Rip, a black beam of light pierced through the bodies of 2 guardians at the same time, the invading devilish energy shattering their meridians and smashing up their internal organs. RMMBB, a moon god and 2 Brahma kings were sucked into a swiftly contracting darkness devil domain, and no matter how much they struggled, they could not break free. The devil domain exploded after it had contracted to its very limit. After that, the 3 men cried out in misery as they were sent flying, their blood spraying through the air. Beams of power rent apart the darkness as they ceaselessly exploded against the demonic wheel and Jasmine's body. The evil infant's wails and laughter went from shrill to weak, and the image of the evil infant in the sky was gradually beginning to become blurry. Jasmine did not know how much power she had left, nor did she know how many wounds she had taken, but she also basically did not care what kind of wounds she had already received, and she cared even less when she would die. The only thing that remained constant was that the demonic wheel in her hand was still releasing a devilish light that was more terrifying than any nightmare as she buried one supreme divine master after another in the abyss of death. Boom, boom, boom. 3 beams of green light that merged together exploded on Jasmine's body at the same time. Following the evil infant's hoarse shout, Jasmine was blasted into the distance, the black light around her body going out for a moment. The demonic wheel also flew out of her hand for the first time ever. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor's eyes suddenly flashed, and he spat blood from his mouth, spraying it on his golden sword. The body of the sword immediately started glowing like the sun as he seized this rare opportunity and directly thrust it towards Jasmine's life vein. The demonic wheel had left her grip. The devilish light had been extinguished. Now that a big gap in her defenses had been exposed, and she was left without the evil infant's protection, he was incomparably sure that this sword strike would definitely be able to destroy Jasmine's life vein. The distance of several kilometers was merely a fraction of an instant for a god emperor. With a flash of golden light, the golden sword of the Brahma Heaven God Emperor had already reached Jasmine's solar plexus. But before the golden light could even be released, a pale white hand had already gripped the body of the sword. Black light once again flared from the hand, and the body of the golden sword immediately felt as if it had been sealed in ice. It was not able to advance even a millimeter further. The God Emperor might that was just about to erupt also seemed as if it had been trapped in a cage of darkness, unable to be released. "You!" As he looked at Jasmine's black eyes, which slowly swung around to meet his, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor felt as though a ghost god had terrified his soul as his whole body suddenly went cold. The reason why Jasmine's power had suddenly become so dreadful was, indeed, because of the awakening of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. But what the world was unaware of was that she had not been seized and transformed into the evil infant by that demonic wheel. On the contrary, she was the master of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. She had not been forced into becoming the evil infant. Instead, she was the evil infant's master. Thus, the power of the evil infant was her power as well. Even if the evil infant had left her grasp, the power that surged through her body was still the complete power of the evil infant. Unfortunately for him, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor realized this far too late and right before his eyes that were filled with the muted light of disbelief. Jasmine's other hand heavily smashed into his chest. That delicate palm that was surrounded by a dense black light pierced right through him and emerged from his back with an explosion of blood. Dark energy that came from the abyss itself directly exploded inside the Brahma Heaven God Emperor's body, and his complexion turned a dusky gray at an even faster rate than the eternal Heaven God Emperor. However, it was also at this time that 3 golden seals, 3 clusters of dreadful power that had come from the Brahma monarch, 3 Brahma gods, exploded simultaneously against Jasmine's back. Bang, bang, bang. Those 3 golden beams of light exploded on Jasmine's back before piercing into her body and exploding out the front. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor's eyes grew gray and dim, and he dropped toward the ground like a falling stone. Meanwhile, it was as if Jasmine had been struck by a meteor. She was sent flying into the distance, leaving behind trailing streaks of black light and traces of blood in the air. God Emperor! The 3 Brahma gods had combined their strength to severely wound Jasmine. But after that, they immediately swooped down to catch the Brahma Heaven God Emperor. The Brahma Heaven God Emperor's complexion was greenish-black, but he gave a strict yell that was accompanied by blood. "Don't bother with me. Hurry up and kill her. We definitely cannot let her escape. Hurry up and go." All 4 of the Eastern Divine Region's God Emperors had sustained severe injuries. In fact, these were the worst injuries they had ever received in their lives. However, the power of the evil infant had finally started to weaken bit by bit. But what a bitter price they had to pay. If they allowed the evil infant to escape today, not only would it make all the serious losses they had sustained today worthless, the trouble they would have in the future would be unimaginable. "Yes," the 3 Brahma gods swiftly replied. They pushed the Brahma heaven god emperor to one of the Brahma kings as they shot off into the distance, golden light radiating from their bodies. Boom. A streak of black light explosively split the sky, and Jasmine stood up from a pile of rubble. The evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had already flown back into her hand, but the moment she stood up, she fiercely stumbled to her knees. After that, she vomited out more than 10 mouthfuls of sickly black blood. Her vision was also starting to grow more and more dim and blurry. Have I also finally reached my limit? No, I still need to kill even more. I still haven't killed that old villain. The old villain that most deserves to be buried together with him. Xianxia, wait for me, I'm going to join you real soon. As she slowly raised up the demonic wheel, the black lights around her strongly flared up. Yet this caused everything around her to suddenly go black, and Xianxia's figure floated up in her increasingly blurry vision. He had faced the star god realm for her. He had been soaked in his own blood for her. He had been turned to ashes by flames because of her. To be turned to ashes by flames. All of a sudden, it was as if a lightning bolt had flashed through her mind, and a cluster of long-extinguished starlight faintly flared to life in her eyes. She floated up in the air, but she did not rush towards the Brahma kings or moon gods who were trying to surround her. Instead, she turned around and struck a cold and lonely figure as she fled towards the empty distance, to the unknown distance. Damn it, she's trying to run. Hurry up and chase after her. We definitely can't let her get away. On the completely broken ground, Xianxia silently observed the direction that Jasmine had left in, and she saw one figure after the other desperately give chase. Her ears rang with incomparably chaotic and deafening roars and wails. From the beginning to the end, she had merely dazedly witnessed everything unfold. Her face was expressionless, and she did not say a single word, and the same lightless emptiness that had appeared in Jasmine's eyes had also appeared in hers. In this star god realm that had been transformed into a calamitous purgatory, in this place that had been engulfed by the evil infant's dark shadow, nearly no one could spare the attention to notice her existence. Jasmine's figure flew far away, disappearing in the place where the earth met the sky. After that, Xianxia slowly closed her eyes for a long time. When she finally opened them, what shone in her eyes was a foreign coldness and determination. She rose up and moved her legs as she soundlessly left. The figure of that impish and delicate young girl and those rainbow-colored skirts that fluttered and danced in the wind. What accompanied them was a dim and shattered heart and soul. Amidst the chaos and panic, no one noticed her leave, and there were even less people who knew where she went. In fact, even she herself did not know it. Eastern Divine Region, Snow Song Realm, Ice Phoenix Sacred Hall. Ping, a very light and faint shattering sound rang in the sea of Xianxia's heart. Xianxia's icy eyes trembled and her expression froze on her face. The dancing of the ice spirits surrounding her slowed down before completely going still, but after that, they started to dance chaotically. A shocked expression crossed the face of Bingyun, who had just been conversing in a soft voice with Xianxia. After that she said, "Big sister, what's the matter?" Xianxia slowly stood up. She looked at the flying snow that filled the skies outside the hall before saying in a gloomy voice, "Xianxia's soul crystal has shattered." Bingyun shot to her feet. "What did you say?" Xianxia closed her eyes and did not say anything for a very long time. Bingyun's snowy figure blurred and she arrived at Xianxia's side as she said in an urgent voice, "Are you saying that Xianxia, he's dead?" Xianxia said, her voice cold and detached. There was no joy or sadness in it. "How did he die?" Bingyun's chest heaved dramatically, and her cherry-colored lips had now been tinted by a shade of ghastly white, as if a layer of snow had covered them. "He died in the star god realm, for the sake of the heavenly slaughter star god," Xianxia said in a soft voice. The moment the soul crystal broke, it also showed the last thoughts and images that the dead person saw right before his death to the person who had inserted the soul crystal. So she had very clearly seen how Xianxia had died in the end. She had seen it more clearly than anyone else. Bingyun's lips faintly parted, but it was only after a long time that she was able to speak in a voice that was as light and faint as a dream. Wasn't he in the dragon god realm? Why would he suddenly go to the star god realm? Just what exactly happened? Dead is dead, so there is no need to bother about it any longer. Xianxia's voice was gloomy and cold. So gloomy and cold that it startled Bingyun. He was not killed by anyone else. He stubbornly sent himself to his own death despite clearly knowing that he was bound to die. So many people wished for him to live. So many people did their utmost to protect him, yet he still chose to send himself to his death. It's fine if he died, it's for the best that he died. I'm Yuxuanian, do not have such a stupid and foolish disciple. With a heavy wave of her snowy sleeve, Yuxuanian turned around and coldly left. Big sister! Before the cold voice had faded from her ears, Mu Bingyun spoke in a worried voice as she gazed at her sister's back. Are you? All right, in the next few years, I will be secluding myself in the heavenly Netherfrost Lake. You are not to disturb me even if a momentous event occurs. Mu Xuanian's figure slipped into the ice, and snow causing her icy hair to dance in the mournful cold. Also, since Yun Qi is already dead, then treat it as if he had never appeared before. After this, you are not to mention his name in front of me ever again. As her cold voice fell, her icy figure disappeared into the distance, and the snowy winds outside the palace seemed to grow somewhat chaotic. Mu Bingyun was dazed for a long time, and she rather absent-mindedly walked out of the hall before staring dumbly at that row of messy footprints that were left in the snow. For one born in the snow song realm, they had been accompanied by snow and ice all their life. So even the most ordinary Ice Phoenix Palace disciple would not leave a single trace if they stepped on snow. Realm, the peerlessly terrifying cosmic storm that had enough power to destroy everything, finally stilled. The star god realm was a place surrounded by stars since ancient times, and it looked like it had the protection of the heaven itself. But today it had been reduced to a rubble-strewn, dark, and ashen wasteland that no one would have believed was a king realm of the eastern divine region had they seen it from a distance. The core of the star god realm, Star God City, had also been completely destroyed. Not a single intact object to be found in miles. The Star God Palace, the Heavenly Star Lake, the Star-Reaching Pavilion, the protective profound formations, everything and anything that had made up Star God Realm's million-year worth of wealth, symbol, and foundation had been utterly destroyed. The destruction was so thorough that it was almost as if they had been erased from the surface of the world. The Star God Emperor stood blankly at the center of the wasteland. Just yesterday, Star God City had been sparkling like an immortal realm or holy land that was surrounded by stars. Even if the Star God realm was destined to perish one day, it should have perished in a natural disaster that encompassed the entire world, or a terrible war between king realms that lasted for millennia or even tens of millennia. But no, the Star God realm had been turned into a wasteland in just a single day. An entire king realm gone just like that. What a joke, what a joke. Although the Star God Emperor was the first God Emperor to have exhausted all of his strength, he was actually the one who suffered the fewest injuries. He looked around him in a daze with muddy eyes and a stupid look that didn't fit his identity, seemingly wishing that everything had just been a ridiculous nightmare. The Moon God Emperor was gravely wounded, and Yue Wuji was rushing him back to the Moon God realm for treatment as quickly as possible. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor and Brahma Heaven God Emperor had also suffered serious injuries, and the devilish energy that had been inflicted upon them was tormenting them even now. But none of them had left for treatment yet. They just couldn't rest easy unless they witnessed the death of the evil infant with their own eyes. Cough, cough, cough. The Eternal Heaven God Emperor looked to be in great pain, and his complexion was a shockingly bluish-black color. Every time he coughed loudly, a spittle of reddish-black blood would exit his throat. He was barely able to get up to his feet with support, but he hardly took 2 steps forward before he felt like he would collapse on his feet again. Left with no choice, he had to sit on the ground once more. On the other side, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor's wounds were even worse than the Eternal Heaven God Emperor's. Jasmine had punched right through his chest, but he was actually faring better than the Eternal Heaven God Emperor due to his immense divine power. The 2 God Emperors exchanged a glance with each other before their expressions turned bitter. They had never seen the other party be wounded as terribly as they were. If the Moon Gods, the Guardians, the Brahma God, and the Brahma Kings hadn't made it in time, the 2 strongest God Emperors of the Eastern Divine Region might have perished already. How are your wounds? The Eternal Heaven God Emperor asked. My wounds are fine, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor answered, but this devilish energy that attacks the heart, I don't think I'll be resting easy for the next couple of years. His comment caused the Brahma King next to him to turn cold with shock. The devilish energy that had seeped into Brahma Heaven God Emperor's body was powerful enough to torture him for several years. What frightening power! He, the Eternal Heaven God Emperor smiled bitterly. I happen to know of a way that can ease this suffering quickly. The Dragon Queen, you mean? The Brahma Heaven God Emperor shook his head. The Dragon Queen's favor is immeasurably precious. We can't possibly waste it on such a trivial matter. Let us leave it for the time when our lives are truly threatened." The eternal Heaven God Emperor bowed his head slightly in deep understanding. The Moon God Emperor, though, the Brahma Heaven God Emperor looked to the west. "I doubt he'll hold out until he sees the Dragon Queen." The two God Emperors fell silent. The Guardians and Brahma Kings protecting them wore distorted expressions while feeling stifled in the heart. The weight that sat in their hearts, the realization that there was still something out there that could easily destroy them even though they were the greatest existences in the world, was heavy. "Don't worry," the Brahma Heaven God Emperor said. "The evil infant's injuries are no lighter than ours. She will not escape." He had just finished saying this when a group of powerful auras approached them quickly from the distance. They reached the God Emperors in just the blink of an eye. They were the Moon Gods, Guardians, Brahma God, and Brahma Kings who had gone away earlier to hunt down Jasmine, however. The evil infant's corpse was nowhere to be seen. "Where is the evil infant?" The eternal Heaven God Emperor struggled to his feet. His guardians then knelt on the ground and reported regretfully. She was too fast, and for some reason her aura suddenly vanished into nothing. The eternal Heaven God Emperor shivered once before he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His already wan complexion turned even whiter than before. He had just recalled that the evil infant was also the heavenly slaughter star god. She was the fastest and stealthiest star god in the entire eastern divine region. All four God Emperors were heavily injured, and the Moon God Emperor was even nearing his death. Although they had successfully driven the evil infant into a corner thanks to the sacrifice of many star gods, Moon Gods, Guardians, and Brahma Kings, she had ultimately escaped. If she were given time to recover her strength, then the entire eastern divine region, no, the entire God realm would be in great danger. "My lord," the Guardians were stunned by the eternal Heaven God Emperor's reaction. They said frightfully, "Please calm down, my lord, it is all our fault." The Brahma Heaven God Emperor sighed heavily before he closed his eyes, saying, "The evil infant has returned to the world and her power is terrifying beyond imagination. This is no longer just our problem alone. We must inform the Western Divine Region and the Southern Divine Region immediately about her return and make an announcement to the world so we may find her. We must kill her immediately after we find her. We cannot give her any opportunity to take a breather or recover." Suddenly, he glared angrily at the Star God Emperor and growled, "Xing Jiukong, what the hell is going on?" The Star God Emperor looked so ashen-faced that it was as if he couldn't even muster his sorrow. "I didn't know, I never knew that. She had the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations in her." "You didn't know?" The Brahma Heaven God Emperor clearly didn't believe him. He pushed further with a brutal look on his face. "Then tell me, why have the Star God realm activated the absolute star soul barrier in the first place?" "I said I didn't know." Star God Emperor's voice turned chilly. "Don't tell me you're accusing me of turning the Star God realm to this state on purpose." It was the truth. He really didn't know that the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations that had destroyed the era of devils and gods and gone missing afterwards was inside Jasmine all this time. However, he wouldn't forget the moment the evil infant came back to life even in death. By now, he had vaguely realized that the evil infant had only awakened because Yun Qi had died a horrible death before Jasmine and caused her to snap. Originally, it was supposed to be in a complete slumber. In the end, the real reason this disaster had happened was because of the Star God Realm ceremony. More specifically, his ambition was the cause of everything. There was absolutely no way he was telling the truth to anyone, or he would be accused by every living being for his sins instantly, and suffer the fury of the Brahma Heaven God Realm, the Eternal Heaven God Realm, and the Moon God Realm. Right now, the Star God Realm, assuming that it was still worthy of its name in its current state, was without a doubt in absolute shambles. Everything had been destroyed, and countless lives had been lost in the process. Only 6 star gods and 17 elders were still living, and every one of them had been injured during the battle. The heavenly soul star god had even lost both his legs. It would be easy to remake them, but to restore them back to the level of a divine body was a completely different story. The Star God realm was still 20 or so divine masters strong, but it was no longer worthy of being considered a king realm. How could it be, when the realm itself was completely gone? The Brahma Heaven God Emperor's face looked as dark as ever. He was just about to interrogate the Star God Emperor further when the devilish energy inside his body suddenly went on a rampage and caused him to sway. He dropped weakly to the floor and looked like he was in great pain. God Emperor, your treatment mustn't be delayed any further, or you might suffer irreparable damage. A Brahma god said solemnly, "We will do everything in our power to search for the evil infant. We will be relying on the eternal heaven god realm to inform the world of its emergence with the voice of eternal heaven." The Brahma heaven god emperor forced down the devilish energy that was racking his body before pointing a finger at the star god emperor. "The evil infant's return had better have nothing to do with you, or else I will tear you apart myself." "We go," the Brahma heaven god emperor growled once before leaving. He really shouldn't delay his treatment any longer. The eternal heaven god emperor had also turned towards the star god emperor before asking a sudden question. "Where is Xianxia?" The star god emperor answered listlessly. "The evil infant's power is sufficient to wipe out all of our star guards, so how could he possibly survive the attack?" The eternal heaven god emperor fell silent for a long time before he let out a long sigh. It was true that the evil infant had nearly destroyed the entire star god realm, and even the slightest brush with the shockwave would turn the likes of Xianxia to dust. Although the eternal heaven god emperor was prepared for this answer, his heart still ached in pain and lamentation at the loss of Xianxia. Why did he come? Why was he able to enter the absolute star soul barrier? The eternal heaven god emperor asked. The star god emperor didn't say anything this time. "Sigh, never mind. What's past is past. Nothing will change even if I get an answer. But what a shame it is to lose a legendary genius who may just be able to rewrite the very myth of the Eastern divine region." The eternal heaven god emperor stopped to look at his surroundings. Then he sighed. "Star god emperor, I doubt there are many creatures left on the surface of the star god realm, and this devilish energy may take a very, very long time to clear. Should you have nowhere else to go, would you like to recuperate in the eternal heaven god realm?" "I thank you for your kindness, eternal heaven god emperor." But the star god emperor shook his head despite the blankness in his eyes. "The epic long heart's blood and glory of my ancestors has turned into a wasteland during my reign, but I cannot abandon it for as long as I am still the star god emperor. This is my place of death, and so this is where I will remain. I won't be able to face my ancestors otherwise." All 6 star gods bowed their heads sadly and said not a word. "Never mind then." The eternal heaven god emperor nodded. "However, I'm sure you understand the idiom, where there's life, there's hope. If you happen to change your mind one day, you may come to eternal heaven whenever you wish. We go." That was the greatest kindness the eternal heaven god emperor could possibly show to the star god emperor. Everyone, the moon god realm, the eternal heaven god realm, and the Brahma heaven god realm, had left. The world grew quieter and colder. Worse, the black devilish energy had painted a layer of despair to this desolate wasteland. "All of you are not to tell anyone about the ceremony, Xianxia and Jasmine," the star god emperor said. The star gods and the elders all nodded in response. They weren't stupid, and they had all figured out that their ceremony of destruction might very well be the trigger that had sparked the awakening of the evil infant. Considering that the evil infant was still very much alive, if someone were to learn of the truth, the consequences would be unimaginable. "My king, what should we do in the future?" the great elder of the star gods asked listlessly. The star god emperor stretched his arm wide and summoned a strange, round disk where 12 different kinds of profound lights were dancing above it. The light represented each of the 12 star gods, and among them the light of heavenly poison, heavenly origin, and heavenly strength were especially bright. They glowed like burning flames. The star god emperor looked up at the gray sky and added, "So long as the stars do not fade, the origin power of star gods shall never wither. Our origin power remains intact, so the star god realm will rise again one day." The nightmares of the day ran chaotically in his mind as his eyes slowly turned gray. Finally, he lost control over his rebellious blood flow as everything surged up into his head at once. The blood that jetted out of his mouth was at least 10 meters long. He then collapsed to the ground and fainted completely. Xianxia was dead. He had shocked the world in a single battle during the conferred god battle, defeating Luo Changsheng, who had previously been the head of the 4 god children of the Eastern region, and had induced a never-before-seen 9-stage heavenly tribulation. He had been prophesied to be the child of the heavens. By the heavenly mystery realm, the dragon monarch wanted to take him as a foster son. The eternal heaven god emperor wanted to make him his direct disciple, and the goddess had taken the initiative to lower herself to propose to him. After he had gone to the moon god realm, he had even caused the god empress to run away with him. causing the entire moon god realm to lose all face and dignity, throwing them into chaos. Ever since he had made an appearance at the Profound God Convention, every single thing he had done had completely and utterly shocked the world. It had even been colored as something out of legend, especially when he had completely and utterly broken the historical dominance and monopolization the upper star realms held in the conferred God battle, raising the spirits of all the middle and lower star realms, allowing them to take pride in this act. Yet just a little over a year after the conferred God battle, he had fallen in the star God realm, buried under the power of the evil infant. Furthermore, this news was not based on baseless rumors that came out of nowhere. It had come from the eternal heaven God realm, the place whose trustworthiness could not be refuted. Countless people were shocked and sighed sympathetically at the news. It was just that the minds of the people did not dwell on this piece of news for very long, because there was another piece of world-shocking news that was released at the same time, and it was news that turned the entire Eastern Divine region, no, the entire God realm upside down. The evil infant had reemerged. The star god realm's heavenly slaughter star god had been the medium that the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had used to awaken. One of the four king realms, the star god realm, had nearly been annihilated under the evil infant's power, and all of their star guards had been killed. The terrible battle which had gathered and concentrated the highest level of battle power in the Eastern Divine region had ended with all four god emperors sustaining severe injuries. Furthermore, 2 star gods, 2 moon gods, 3 guardians, and 1 Brahma king had fallen as well. The mere thought of these names would cause boundless reverence to well up in one's heart. Yet so many of them had actually fallen in the span of a single day. In the end, the evil infant had even managed to escape safely. Its current whereabouts were unknown. Furthermore, all of these things had been announced to the world by the eternal heaven God realm via the voice of eternal heaven. The entire world had been left reeling with shock and horror after the voice of eternal heaven had said its piece. All of the king realms and upper star realms, and even some of the middle and lower star realms, sent out countless profound practitioners to secretly search for any traces of the evil infant's whereabouts. The demonic wheel that had once destroyed the universe. The demonic wheel that had severely wounded 4 god emperors even though they had combined their might. A power that slaughtered divine masters like one would slaughter a dog imperceptibly. It was as if heavy shadow had engulfed the vast Eastern Divine region, and even the entire God realm itself. Eastern Divine region, Moon God realm. In the God Emperor's chambers, the Moon God Emperor reclined on a couch, his body surrounded by more than 10 profound formations, chaotic profound light concentrating on and engulfing his body. It was supposed to be suppressing the devilish energy inside his body and healing his injuries. But in reality, it was forcibly extending his life. Within his bed chambers, all of the moon gods, moon god envoys, and descendants of the emperor had been gathered. All of them prostrated themselves on the ground, their expressions fearful and anxious. One could also hear either the clear or stifled sound of sobbing every now and then from the children and grandchildren of the emperor in the back of the bedchambers. The moon god emperor's complexion remained a greenish black, and his body had been entirely covered by profound light. However, the people who had seen his actual wounds, even if they were moon gods or moon god envoys, every single one of them had been so shocked that their courage had been ruptured. Even for a god emperor, all of these wounds were fatal ones. Within the profound formations, the moon god emperor finally began to open his eyes slowly. A purple light flashed in those eyes, but this purple light that had once been able to subdue all under heaven with a single flash had now been reduced to a light that was as weak as the light of a firefly at this moment. "Wuji," he slowly said, "remain behind. The rest of you withdraw from this place." "Royal Father," the moon god crowned Prince Xianxia, who was in the front, raised his head as he cried out. His face was streaked with tears and his voice trembled as he said, "This child wants to accompany his father. I beg for Royal Father to not chase this child away." "Withdraw," the moon god emperor said as he waved a limp and powerless hand. "Royal Father, this child," Xianxia wanted to continue, each word accompanied by a sob. "Withdraw. K. The moon god emperor's voice suddenly grew severe, and he burst out into a painful and intense coughing fit due to the devilish energy in his body being disturbed. "This king has not died yet, but are all of you already starting to disobey my orders?" Even though the moon god emperor was so severely wounded that he was on the edge of death, his might still remained, and that low shout of pain and anger caused everyone's heart to shake in shock. Yue Xuanj panikedly inclined his head. This child does not dare. Royal father, please quell your anger. This child will leave now." Everyone left, and very quickly, only two people, the Moon God Emperor and Yue Wuji, were left in the bedchamber. The Moon God Emperor lightly closed his eyes as he took a very long breath, but his complexion was becoming more dark and ashen. "God Emperor, the Western Divine Region's Dragon Queen can definitely save you. Why are you unwilling to give it a try?" The Golden Moon God Yue Wuji said in a pain-filled voice. He took a single look at the Moon God Emperor's wounds before averting his gaze once more. He did not dare give them another glance. "It's not that I'm unwilling, it's that it truly is already too late," the Moon God Emperor said with much difficulty. He was the person most clear on what kind of state his body was in. The distance between the Moon God Realm and the Western Divine Region's Dragon God Realm was too far, so even if Dragon Queen Xianxia was truly willing to extend a hand and help him, he would not be able to hold out until then. Besides, the vanishing Moon Celestial Palace that could reach the Dragon God Realm in the fastest speed possible had already been given to Yun Qi by Xia Qingyu. "The truths garnered from the heavenly mystery realm have never deceived me," the Moon God Emperor said with a miserable laugh. "As the Emperor of a king realm, I am still unable to escape my destiny. It looks like all the preparations that I have made over the last few years were not wasted after all." "God Emperor?" Yue Wuji closed his eyes in pain. The Moon God Emperor raised a hand, holding aloft a glazed pearl which gleamed with a strange light. Upon seeing this pearl, Yue Wuji's eyes widened fiercely. "Wuji, this imperial moon-glazed pearl, this king will entrust it to you now." But Yue Wuji did not move to take the pearl. Instead, he fell to his knees fiercely and said in a frightened and alarmed voice, "God Emperor, Wuji is absolutely unworthy of carrying such a responsibility. I beg the God Emperor to take back his command." The Moon God Realm's imperial moon-glazed pearl was the core artifact of the Moon God Realm. It was the wellspring of all the Moon God divine powers and the symbol of the Moon God Emperor. "Wuji, you and I have been brothers for so many years, so how can this king not know you all too well?" the Moon God Emperor said gently. "This king does not want you to inherit the title of Moon God Emperor. Rather, I am entrusting it to you so you can hand it over to Qingyu." Yue Wuji raised his head, but he did not look too surprised. It was just that his expression had become incomparably more solemn and grave than before. "God Emperor, Wuji is well aware that your greatest wish over the last few years was for Qingyu to succeed you as the next God Emperor. But the plan involving her pretending to be the God Empress has been ruined, and there is no longer a clear path for her to ascend the throne. After all, she was born in the lower realms, and what happened during the wedding also incited the wrath of the entire realm. Even becoming your foster daughter was something extremely hard to do. If she succeeded your title as God Emperor, there will a great amount of obstruction and resistance. I'm afraid that. At that time, it was very likely that she would face objection from the entire realm. How could a young girl who had not even reached 30 years of age endure such great resistance to her rule? Furthermore, Yue Wuji finally said after hesitating for a moment, perhaps Qingyu might not be willing to do so either. "How can this king not understand all of these things?" the Moon God Emperor said, with his eyes still closed. All those years ago, she had promised to pretend to be the God Empress and inherit the title of God Emperor in the future, because she wanted to repay the debt of gratitude she owed this king. However, 1 year ago, after she returned, this king sensed that she suddenly had a desire for the seat of God Emperor. Furthermore, it was a very intense desire at that. Yue Wuji was stunned by those words. Her change happened after Yun Qi appeared, so of course it can only be because of that kid. But now that kid just had to go and die, KKK. Due to an agitation that he had a hard time controlling, the Moon God Emperor's injuries were aggravated and he vomited out many mouthfuls of black-colored blood. So even this king does not know if the current Qingyu is still willing or not, KKK. This was something the Moon God Emperor had been keeping to himself for very long. When he finally regained his composure, his face grew slightly less ashen, but what replaced it was a deathly pale complexion that was shocking to see. "Wuji," he opened his mouth once more. "Use a profound imagery jade to etch out the words that this king is about to say. The last will and testament I am leaving behind that declares that I am going to pass my position to Xia Qingyu. If she is willing, then hand the imperial moon-glazed pearl over to her and publicly announce this king's last will and testament. If she is not willing, then you will succeed me. Even though this action will trouble and burden you, you are this king's blood brother, and after this king passes on, your strength will also be foremost among all the moon gods. You are the only choice that can convince the masses then. Yue Wuji's lips quivered, but he did not try to oppose or deny the moon god emperor. He stretched out a hand to take the imperial moon glazed pearl and said, Wuji will definitely not disappoint the god emperor in what he has entrusted me with. After the profound image was etched, the moon god emperor closed his eyes for a while before saying, Summon Qingyu here. The god emperor's bedchambers contained a cold desolateness it had never possessed before. Xia Qingyu slowly walked inside, her footsteps producing no sound. She was merely wearing a pure white set of plain moon robes, but her far too beautiful elegance imperceptibly caused this cold and desolate bedchamber to grow that much brighter. Foster father. She knelt down and softly said those words. Upon witnessing Xia Qingyu's arrival, the moon god emperor's eyes grew several degrees brighter. But the words that came out of his mouth were exceptionally cruel. Qingyu, Yun Qi is dead. I know, Xia Qingyu replied. There was no sorrow or joy in her voice. Her cold and detached response caused the moon god emperor's eyebrows to knit together. After sighing silently in his heart, he got straight to the point. Wuji, come and administer the law. Yue Wuji was startled by those words. But after that, his expression abruptly changed, and he yelled out in an alarmed voice, God Emperor, could it be that you want to know? That is out of the question. The Zai-Que divine power can be inherited through the imperial moon glazed pearl, but how can we force such a thing to happen? This must not come to pass. Xia Qingyu's beautiful eyes opened, and she resolutely shook her head. Foster father, your current wounds are far too severe. If you lose your Zai-Que divine power, you will definitely. Do all of you want this king to die with many regrets? The moon god emperor let out a low roar, the profound formation immediately being shaken by waves of black energy, causing his entire body to contort in pain. Normally, the origin power inherited from the imperial moon glazed pearl would require a very long time before it would once again reawaken in the profound veins of the new moon god. But Qingyu, it will be different for you, the moon god emperor said in an incomparably resolute voice. You have the 9 profound, exquisite body, so this sort of direct inheritance will allow the Zai-Que divine power to reach its peak in the shortest amount of time, and it will even combine with your original power. It will also allow you to surpass this king in the shortest amount of time. This is a miracle of the profound way, and it will also be a miracle when it comes to the power of the moon gods, but it can only become a reality in your body. To be able to allow the Zai-Que divine power to shine so gloriously, even if this king were to die 10,000 times, I would be able to rest easy. Xia Qingyu's chest heaved, but she finally closed her eyes and softly uttered, Yes. The moon god emperor left the profound formations which were forcibly extending his life, and sat in front of Xia Qingyu. A special profound formation was formed below him and Xia Qingyu as it slowly rotated. After a long period of time, he slowly lifted his finger. A dot of purple light collecting at its tip. This was a very small dot of purple light, but in an instant, it illuminated the entire bedchamber in a sea of purple. The moon god emperor's complexion grew incomparably pale and wan in the next moment, but his finger shot forward like lightning, lightly striking the middle of Xia Qingyu's brows. The purple moonlight immediately spread out from the middle of her brows, causing her entire figure and the entire world to be engulfed within this light. Inheriting the power of a moon god could originally only be done after a moon god had died, and their origin power had been returned to the imperial moon glazed pearl. After that, once they found the next person who could inherit that power, they would use the imperial moon glazed pearl to pass that moon god's power to the next moon god. It was also done this way in the star god realm. This sort of direct inheritance was the first of its sort in the history of the moon god realm, and it could only be realized by someone who possessed the 9 profound, exquisite body. Time flowed swiftly in this purple-colored world. Yue Wuya's face was incomparably calm, and there was even some satisfaction that could be found in his expression. However, the expression of Yue Wuji, who was beside him, was filled with pain, because he was well aware that the only reason Yue Wuya could still struggle at death's door despite such dreadful injuries was precisely because of his strong Zai-Que divine power. Furthermore, the moment he lost the Zai-Que divine power was undoubtedly the moment he would perish as well. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, CLANG. At some random point in time, the purple light suddenly completely dissipated, A layer of sparkling and translucent purple light flowed all over Xianxia's body, down to the very tips of her long hair, which was dancing in the air even though there was no wind. Her beautiful eyes opened, and in the depths of those eyes flashed a deep purple light that looked like the starry sky. The face of Yue Wuya, who was sitting in front of her, had lost all color. Even the previous greenish-black tinge had completely disappeared, and his hair, which had originally been black and tinged by purple, had already turned gray at some point of time. He slowly lowered his finger, before directly toppling backwards. God Emperor? Yue Wuji hurriedly rushed over to support Yue Wuya with his arm. Upon sensing his aura, an aura so weak and light that it felt like the dying rays of an evening sun, boundless pain and agony appeared on his face. Foster father? Xianxia swiftly walked right in front of him as she thought of using the Zai Qued divine power she had just acquired to extend his life. However, she was slowly but firmly stopped from doing so by Yue Wuya. Yue Wuya looked upwards, his voice wispy and weak. Do you still remember the day that I found you? Xianxia nodded her head while emphasizing each word that she uttered. Xianxia remembers. I will never dare to forget. That day when you had been pushed into a corner in order to not be sullied by others. You desired to end your own life. I took action and saved you, and I even personally killed those people who were in the divine origin realm. This was the first time in 10,000 years that he had deigned to personally kill a few people who had just reached the divine origin realm. People who could not even be considered as trash in his eyes. But did you know that, during our journey to the moon god realm, how many times I had thought of taking action and killing you? Xianxia. Because I hoped that you were Wugu's child, because she would have been overjoyed by that. But I was also afraid that you were Wugu's child, Wugu's, and that man's child. Xianxia's chest violently heaved. Yu, during the past few years, no matter how good I was to you, no matter how much I swore that I would definitely not harm your father, you have never been willing to even reveal a single character of your father's name. You dreamed of returning to the place of your birth, but you've never dared to go back. He. Yue Wuya suddenly let out a miserable laugh. Let me tell you today, you were absolutely right in doing so because I hate him. My hatred for him is incomparable. If you had let me find out who he is, I would definitely have killed him. I would definitely have killed him with my own hands. Xianxia averted her gaze as a pained look appeared in her eyes, but she used all of her might to suppress it. Because he stained my Wugu, stole away my Wugu, if it was one of my other concubines, I would be able to bestow her to him, as many as he wanted. I could have given him all of them. But why? Why did it have to be Wugu? Why? Xianxia bit down on her lower lip fiercely, her body lightly trembling. She wanted to say that her father had done nothing wrong. But this matter had absolutely nothing to do with right or wrong, had nothing to do with whether one should hate or should not hate. Wugu and I were in love for 100 years, and we wanted to live and die together. She and your father spent only 7 short years together. The year she came back, she had terminated her marriage with your father and had not brought back a single thing that had to do with him. Even the clothes she wore were the ones that she had worn when she had met with disaster all those years ago. But why was she not willing to allow me to erase the memories she had of your father? She would rather allow herself to become mired in the guilt she felt towards both parties, suffering through that pain and torment, than choose to forget him. Why, KK. 2 deep trails of tears ran down Yue Wuya's wan face. The emperor of a king realm was actually weeping. No, the him who had already entrusted the imperial moon glazed pearl and the Zai Qued divine power to someone else was no longer the moon god emperor. The current him was merely Yue Wuya, a man who could finally freely express his emotions without care, a man who could finally cry if he wanted to. I hate him, even when I'm about to die, I still feel like killing him. He once again let out a miserable laugh. What moon god emperor from start to finish? I've only ever been a narrow-minded and petty man lost in his sorrow, even more than that. I am also a piece of trash who could not even protect the one he loved the most, a useless piece of trash who did not even have the strength to take revenge. God Emperor, none of this is your fault, Yue Wuji said as he shook his head. It's the Brahma monarch god realm. If in the future, even if there's the smallest possibility, Wuji will definitely find an opportunity to kill Kaianai Yinger. Yue Wuya's voice was growing weaker and weaker. If you are willing to become the moon god emperor, then take this imperial moon glazed pearl from Wuji's hands. Your path to ascension will be laden with countless thorns and obstacles, but all of these things will become your greatest tests and training. tests and training that will transform you into a true God Emperor. If you are not willing, after my death, just like you wished, you can also finally return to the star realm where you were born, but you definitely need to take good care of your mother. Also tell your father this for me. I, Yue Wuya, will never, ever forgive him. His voice was as light as a wad of cotton, until it slowly began to fade away like a cloudy mist. Yue Wuya was dead. He had become the first God Emperor to perish before the end of his lifespan in the history of the Moon God realm. No one knew what he had said during the final moments of his life, besides the two people by his side. It had nothing to do with the future of the Moon God realm or his unfulfilled wish as a God Emperor either. Instead, it was about the two people he had loved and hated the most in his life. The former was Xia Qingyu's mother, whereas the latter was Xia Qingyu's father. The Moon God realm was in chaos, and knells were rung everywhere. The moonlight hanging high above the sky died out at once, sinking Divine Moon City into unprecedented sadness and depression. Dazed, Xia Qingyu walked slowly and heavily to the one place where she had stayed longer than any other location in the Moon God realm. It was also the most quiet. She pushed open a palace door, passed through an invisible barrier, and arrived at an isolated realm that was separate from the outside world. There were elegant mountains and rivers in this place, and birds chirping wonderful melodies into one's ears. It was like almost a utopia. A delicate-looking woman in red dress was standing by the edge of a creek. Although she could hear Xia Qingyu's footsteps slowly growing closer towards her, she didn't turn around to greet her. She asked quietly, "Is he gone?" Her words was very, very soft. A gentle breeze could have carried it away. Xia Qingyu came to a stop. "He is gone." "Is that so?" The woman in red dress whispered, but she didn't display any overt reaction. In fact, her voice was as calm as the stream beneath her feet. "He is the Moon God Emperor, but he still wasn't able to escape the clutches of his fated prophecy. Does fate really exist in this world?" "Mother," Xia Qingyu spoke softly and slowly as she stared at her mother's back. "Where will you be going after this? Would you like to come?" She stopped suddenly. She didn't finish her sentence. The woman in red dress turned around to face her, revealing a countenance of unparalleled brightness and beauty despite being burdened with visible languidness and invisible hardships. She said gently while staring at Xia Qingyu, "Qingyu, you've inherited his divine power, right?" Xia Qingyu nodded slightly. "Then where will you be going next?" "I'll go wherever you will go," Xia Qingyu answered without the slightest hesitation. Yue Wugu smiled at her and stroked Xia Qingyu's cheeks gently. She could sense her mother's fingers shaking slightly. "My good girl, Mother is very happy to hear this from you. However, your life has just begun, and you should focus more on planning and carrying out your own path properly." Xia Qingyu nodded. "Don't worry, Mother. I will treat myself well." Yue Wugu withdrew her hand gently and stared at her daughter, her smile growing warmer with each passing moment. "It has only been a couple of years, but it is clear that he treated you better than any other children he had had. Go and give him a proper send-off. I too wish to have a moment of peace." "Okay." Her mother's eyes looked calm, but Xia Qingyu knew that her sorrow must be greater than anyone else's. Xia Qingyu turned around to leave, but her mother's voice reached her just as she was about to step out of the unique realm. "Qingyu, you should learn to live for yourself, get it? You cannot fulfill another person's dream unless you're strong enough on your own. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Xia Qingyu turned around and glanced at her mother with a bit of surprise. Then she nodded. "Yes, Mother. Qingyu has memorized all of your words." Xia Qingyu left, and Yue Wugu was all that was left inside this peaceful world. The woman raised her hands slowly and pressed them against her heart. "Qingyu, I hope that your life will not be fraught with indecision, perplexity, and a constant desire to have the best of both worlds. You should live for yourself. Whatever path you choose to walk from here on, I wish that your footsteps will be firm and certain. Mother will always watch over you from the other side of the world." Yue Wugu whispered with a smile that looked like the morning wind. "Wuya, I failed you during this lifetime, so please allow Wugu to accompany you on your long walk to the Yellow Springs." Xia Qingyu's heart was as heavy as it was confused as the knell that resounded throughout Divine Moon City accompanied her every step. Moreover, her head wouldn't stop replaying the somewhat strange words her mother had said to her earlier. Then, she froze like she was thunderstruck before she ran back to her mother like she had gone mad. Bang! She pushed open the palace door and was immediately greeted by a red figure lying on the ground at the exact same position where she was standing before. The water was running, the birds were still singing, but her life signs were already completely gone. Xia Qingyu's entire world suddenly turned white and soundless. In a daze, she walked to Yue Wugu before falling heavily to her knees beside her. She was biting her lips so hard that it was bleeding, but she refused to let out a single sound. Her seemingly fragile body never stopped shaking, however. Xia Qingyu had no idea how much time had passed when she had finally broken away from the pale white world. But when she stretched out and lifted Yue Wugu with her arms, a circular mirror suddenly fell out of the latter's sleeve and hit the ground softly. Caught by surprise, Xia Qingyu picked up the round mirror and gave it a look. It was made of an incredibly average metal, so average in fact that it was rarely seen in the god realm. Moreover, the passage of time had clearly taken its toll on the item. Subconsciously, Xia Qingyu opened the mirror, and inside she found the profound image of three people. The first person in the image was a spirited-looking man. The second person in the image was a 4-year-old girl. The final person in the image was a boy who looked healthy and robust despite just being 3 years old. Xia Qingyu's hands started shaking harder and harder as she stared at the profound image. A voice as transient as a dream escaped her lips. "You've never forgotten. After all, we've never been abandoned, after all." Her shoulders were shaking, her eyes were shut firm, her right hand was clenching the round mirror in a death grip, and her left hand was holding a warm piece of paper before she realized it. It was the marriage contract she had destroyed, right in front of Yun Qi. A round mirror, a marriage contract. Xia Qingyu finally broke into tears, and she cried like never before inside the isolated realm while clinging to her mother. Xia Qingyu walked aimlessly inside Divine Moon City as she held Yue Wugu's lifeless body in her arms. Her eyes were misty and lightless, and she had no idea where she was, much less where she was going with her mother. Countless memories passed through her mind chaotically. For the past few years, she had felt like she was living a dream. Yue Wuya, her foster father, was the first person ever to give her warmth and kindness in the god realm. Yue Wugu, her birth mother, had given back the affection she had missed for a very long time and the obsession for the profound way she had discarded along the way. And finally, Yun Qi, her husband, was the person who had awakened her from this dream. Here in the god realm, they were undoubtedly the most important people in her life. However, they had all left her and gone away in just a few days' time. The god realm was vast, but the only things it had left for her were coldness and loneliness. She no longer had anyone to depend on, to share companionship with, or to confess to in the god realm. Father's tears had made me want to find mother and reunite the family since young. But in the end, I had forgiven the man who had robbed mother from him in the first place, to the point where I couldn't even bear seeing them being separated ever again. I owed my very life to my sect, and they had sent me and only me away in the face of annihilation. Today, I am strong enough to protect them all, and yet, I can never return. I owed my foster father a kingly favor, but not only have I not returned it in any way, I have even destroyed his wish and face single-handedly. And after today, I no longer had the chance to repay or fix anything in life. Mother, the fact that I was able to find you was providential good luck already. But although I'd never complained a word in your presence, I must admit that I had always held a secret grudge in my heart. I had thought that you had completely cut ties with us, and that you'd truly chosen to abandon and forget us after 20 years of complete separation. But you'd never forgotten about us after all. In fact, the pain you were forced to suffer must have exceeded all imagination. And yet, I can do nothing but to watch you leave us forever. Yun Qi, why didn't you wait for me, heart of glazed glass, exquisite body, unprecedented myth? And yet, why did nothing ever go as I wished? Why was I not able to do anything? Protection of the heavens. That is nothing but a joke to deceive others and oneself. Be it the lower realms or the god realm, there was one thing that had never changed. If one wishes to dominate their own destiny and others, then they must possess unparalleled strength and power. I was the one with unparalleled talent and luck, but why have I only realized this now? The images in her head grew more and more chaotic. They all dissolved into a blur until a golden figure suddenly passed right before her eyes. Kaianai Yinger, ping! The blurry world shattered, the images all faded away into nothingness. Xia Qingyu's footsteps were still slow, but the noise that had accompanied every step was gradually fading away into nothingness. Even the mistiness in her eyes was turning slowly but surely into bone-chilling ice. The chill in her eyes deepened with every step she took, and eventually, it seemed like it was completely bottomless. Xia Qingyu, a voice suddenly rang from ahead. It was a man dressed in purple, and his attire and the moon emblem he wore showed that he was of noble birth. He was the Moon God Emperor's 37th son, Yue Yan. The light of obsession and lust instantly flashed across Yue Yan's eyes when he saw Xia Qingyu. She was familiar with it because more than half of the Moon God Emperor's sons and grandsons were staring at her like this all the time. But this time the gaze was unusually fierce and unrestrained. The reason behind it was, of course, the death of the Moon God Emperor. There was no one left who could protect her anymore. Without the Moon God Emperor's protection, it was doubtful if she could even preserve her identity as the God Emperor's foster daughter. Moreover, she was only at the divine spirit realm, and there were countless people in the Moon God realm alone who could toy with her as they pleased. Xia Qingyu didn't react to his gaze whatsoever. She continued to trudge ahead in silence. Not only had Yue Yan discarded all of his usual grace and modesty, he didn't even look remotely sad that the Moon God Emperor had passed away. As he let out a low chuckle and walked towards Xia Qingyu with a smile on his face, he saw who the dead woman Xia Qingyu was holding and blurted, "Yue Wugu. How did she so the bitch who brought shame to our Moon God realm is finally dead." Xia Qingyu suddenly came to a stop and turned her head slowly. Her purple-tinged eyes then fell on Yue Yan. In that instant, Yue Yan's expression suddenly froze like someone had cast a spell on him. To his shock, Xia Qingyu's normally exquisite eyes were filled with bottomless darkness, and he felt they were devouring his body and soul without mercy. Light faded swiftly from his vision, and a bone-chilling, soul-rending cold suddenly spread throughout his body. Crack! Ice quickly covered the surface of his entire body. His eyes were colorless and his mouth was agape. His body slowly slid down the wall behind him as bone-chilling fear sprouted inside his heart and spread like wild grass. Crack! Everything, including his own existence, had vanished into nothingness. The only thing he could feel was ice and cold. At this point, his pupils had shrunk so much that it was barely visible, and his voice had frozen over so much that he couldn't even make a cry for mercy. Crack! Crack! The ice around him grew thicker and thicker. Both his body and soul were frozen inside an abyss of fear. Bang! Xia Qingyu looked away from Yue Yan, and when she turned around, the ice suddenly shattered and dissolved into nothingness. Yue Yan collapsed on the floor with a greenish-purple look, and he was hugging his own shoulders and shaking like mad. His pupils remained pale and shivering, and he might not be able to wipe away this moment of fear and trauma from his mind for eternity. A terrible stench spread out from beneath his body. Another person appeared right in front of Xia Qingyu. It was the Golden Moon God, Yue Wuji. He had been attracted by Xia Qingyu's aura, and when he showed up in a hurry and saw the woman in her arms, he turned pale and said, "The God Empress, she." No one knew better than him about the 100-year relationship between Yue Wuya and Yue Wugu. Although many years had passed since then, he had never stopped calling Yue Wugu his God Empress. It was because he knew that there would be no other empresses in Yue Wuya's life. "Wuji," Xia Qingyu said calmly, "give me the Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl and the Zai Qued Divine Sword." The way Xia Qingyu had addressed him caught Yue Wuji by surprise. She had called him Wuji instead of the usual Uncle Wuji. Worse, her tone had been cold, intimidating, and entirely forceful. Stunned, Yue Wuji was about to say something when Xia Qingyu suddenly extended her arm in front of herself. In the next instant, a rainbow light and a purple light escaped his possession and flew into Xia Qingyu's hand. It was the Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl and Zai Qued Divine Sword. It surprised Yue Wuji so much that his words had gotten stuck in his throat. He wasn't too surprised that Qingyu was able to forcefully summon the Zai Qued Divine Sword. After all, the weapon was her life-bound artifact. However, the Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl was the 12 moon gods' origin core. It wasn't that it was impossible to summon the Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl by force, but only under the condition that the summoner was the strongest moon god. The Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl belonged only to the strongest moon god, and only the holder of the Imperial Moon Glazed Pearl had the right to become Emperor of the Moon God realm. But how was that possible? Xia Qingyu had only just inherited the divine power of Zai Qued today. How had she become the strongest moon god all of a sudden? But what had happened right before eyes was undoubtedly reality. Was the rumored 9 profound, exquisite body really that amazing? Was this why the Moon God Emperor desired so much to pass down the divine power of Zai Qued to her? Clang! The color of purple dazzled the sky as the Zai Qued Divine Sword glowed suddenly. And it took him only a glance to identify that its purple moonlight was richer than it had ever been in Yue Wuya's possession. Then the imperial moon glazed pearl, and Xianxia divine sword vanished from Xianxia's hands, and she turned away while still holding her mother's corpse. Wuji, I will be burying my mother. Please take care of foster father's burial ceremony, will you? Yes, Yue Wuji answered while not looking entirely himself. It wasn't until Xianxia had walked away and vanished entirely from his gaze that Yue Wuji realized that his back was almost fully bent, and he himself wasn't conscious of it at all until after the fact. It almost seemed like the action had been born out of pure physical and mental instinct. Go well, New Moon God Emperor, he said half-consciously. Author's note, the last chapter blasted so many tycoons out of their holes that my liver shook. For now, the God Realm chapters have come to an end. The next time we return will be many years from now. Emperor's death once again sent huge shockwaves through the eastern divine region, which had already been covered in the evil infant's dark shadow. As a result, the fear and terror surrounding the evil infant grew even more dense and thick. Countless profound practitioners were running around like headless chickens. Terror and impending doom seized their hearts as they searched everywhere for any trace of the evil infant. The various king realms had nearly turned out in full force. They needed to take advantage of the fact that the evil infant was seriously wounded to find her and eliminate her in the shortest amount of time. Day after day passed by and countless profound practitioners had combed over every inch of land in the eastern divine region, but no one was able to discover any traces of the evil infant. They had not been able to find even a single trace. Every day that passed with no news of the evil infant meant that she had recovered a bit more, so the anxiety that twined around the heart of every eastern divine region profound practitioner, especially the profound practitioners from the king realms, increased steadily as they felt the dark shadow of the evil infant grow more and more dense. Considering the fact that this incident might involve the fate of the entire eastern divine region, the first king realm that was nearly destroyed during the disaster, Star God realm, actually didn't catch as much attention as it should have. What used to be a king realm had turned into a scorched, desolate wasteland. Devilish energy was still consuming everything, and the sky remained unnaturally dark. No one who set foot in this place would believe that it was once the Star God realm at all. In fact, they might think that they had accidentally entered the dangerous, dark, and desolate grounds of the northern divine region. We've scoured more than half of the Star God realm, but we only found a couple thousand or so survivors at the fringes. Moreover, most of them were tainted by the devilish energy. The Star God Great Elder reported sadly before Star God Emperor. What about the auxiliary star realms? The Star God Emperor asked. The Heavenly Jade Star God, Aster answered. That battle created a massive space storm that severely impacted the nearby star realms. All our auxiliary star realms have suffered considerable damage. Xing Jukong closed his eyes before lifting a powerless hand and gesturing. The remaining elders should keep searching for survivors. Aster, please notify the other star gods to keep searching for an auxiliary star realm that suits our needs. Understood. Aster shot a glance at the Star God Emperor before asking worriedly, My king, your wounds? It's fine, Xing Jukong said indifferently. Go, Aster's lips parted. She had wanted to ask if they should search for Heavenly Wolf Star God Keijai, but in the end, she chose to give up her wishful thought. There was no way there would be forgiveness between them, even if they were tied by blood. The remaining 6 star gods and 17 elders left again, while Xing Jukong remained seated where he was. Not only had he stayed in that position for the past few days, he had almost never gotten up to his feet. Cough, cough, cough. Xing Jukong clutched his chest and coughed painfully, the seemingly unending stream of pitch-black blood dyeing the pitch-black ground beneath his feet even blacker. Although the evil infant's wheel of myriad tribulations had only regained a tiny portion of its strength, its level was so high that the devilish energy ravaging his body felt like devils that kept eating at his body and life force without end. He possessed the body of a god emperor. He was supposed to be strong enough to suppress its effects and recover, albeit very slowly. However, the current state of the Star God realm and the cause behind everything made it very difficult for him to calm down, not to mention that the pressure and torment he was feeling on the inside was far worse than his body's. Moreover, his injuries had actually worsened for the past few days, as if the fact that his energy recovery wasn't catching up to the speed at which it was being consumed wasn't bad enough already. He wanted to calm himself down, but he just couldn't. When he opened his eyes, he would be greeted by the devastated land of the Star God realm. When he closed his eyes, he would be greeted by the infinite darkness and hatred behind Jasmine's pupils. Back when he and Eternal Heaven God Emperor had parted ways, he had said that he would rather die in the Star God realm. At this rate, though, he might actually be prophesying his own death. He needed to find a place where he could calm himself down, but he just couldn't rest in Eternal Heaven no matter what. He was a God Emperor. He couldn't rely on the charity of another God Emperor no matter what. Therefore, Star God Realm's auxiliary star realms had become his last choice. The devilish energy ravaged his body yet again, and Xing was forced to point a finger at his heart and suppress it with all his might. His complexion had changed several times in the process, but in the end he managed to stop it and spit out a mouthful of nearly pitch-black blood. His complexion recovered just a little, and his aura calmed down slightly after some heavy panting. It was at this moment that a ray of icy blue light suddenly erupted from the space dead ahead of him. Not only had the cold light appeared out of nowhere, it was less than 3 meters away from Xing. It was a flawless white sword covered in blue light, and it was aimed straight at Xing heart. At the speed it was traveling, 3 meters might as well be nothing at all. Xing pupils shrank abruptly, but his emptied profound veins and impossibly heavy limbs made it impossible for him to react to the attack at all. The cold light passed through his heart in the blink of an eye. Eyes bulging and pupils shrinking. Xing stared as a woman clad in icy blue colors appeared in front of him while still gripping the sword that had impaled him. Shock, fear, disbelief, and more gripped him. He had never seen such a chilly pair of eyes in his life, and this one seemed cold enough to turn the entire world to a frozen hell. It was true that he had been severely injured, mostly powerless, and very distracted, but he was still the Star God Emperor. It should have been impossible for the entity to avoid his detection and get as close as just 3 meters away from him. It was a completely undetectable and merciless attack that had come out of nowhere. He wasn't sure if he could have avoided the attack even if he was in his best form, much less now. She had a pair of immeasurable cold eyes and a countenance that eclipsed every ice and snow that existed in this world. Snow, song, realm, king, he forced his voice out of his throat. Then a layer of ice spread out from the Snow Princess sword and sealed away all of the God Emperor's body, organs, blood, profound aura, and finally, the profound veins. With that, she had also cut off the weakened God Emperor's final chance to struggle. Xianxia said nothing in return as she stared at Xing coldly. The chill in her eyes made it clear that it was all she could do not to crush him and turn him into the world's tiniest particles. Xianxia had been hiding nearby using moon-splitting cascades since a day ago, waiting for a golden opportunity to present itself. That golden opportunity had appeared just now when all the star gods and elders had left far enough that they were completely beyond her senses. After that, she raised the Snow Princess sword and impaled the emperor of a king realm that none but the evil infant had dared to offend. The ice covered the star god emperor again and again without a sound, until the man was completely frozen inside and out. It was to the extent where even his aura had become completely concealed. She didn't pull the Snow Princess sword out of the Star God Emperor's heart. She lifted the block of ice with a gust of cold wind before taking off into the distance. Snow Song Realm, Heavenly Netherfrost Lake. Bang! When the Snow Princess sword had returned to its home, the block of ice that held the Star God Emperor fell from high up in the sky before shattering into pieces. Although the Star God Emperor was physically freed, that didn't mean that he had escaped the icy nightmare Xianxia had thrown him into. Lying powerlessly on the ground, the Star God Emperor curled into a ball on the ground and shivered uncontrollably. Not only could he not get up on his feet, he could hardly control his own limbs. He never knew that the cold could be so terrifying until now. And worse, his God Emperor profound veins were so thoroughly suppressed that he wasn't able to unleash even a bit of profound energy. He couldn't understand why. He might have lost a large amount of profound energy, but he still had his star god origin energy. So how was the Snow Song Realm King, who wasn't even a mid-stage divine master, able to freeze his profound veins to such an extent? What was even more incomprehensible to him was the fact that the Realm King of a tiny middle star realm had found the courage and reason to attack him, a god emperor, and bring him back to her home no less. Did she not realize the consequences of her actions? Do you know who I am? He had to stutter out the simple line because he was shaking too much. Try as he might, he wasn't able to draw any energy from his frozen, profound veins to dispel the frigid cold that was plaguing him. "Aren't you afraid that I will annihilate your snow song realm?" His words had failed to elicit any emotion from Xianxia except one. A terrible cold that was colder than even the heavenly netherfrost lake. "Xingjukang, you had driven my disciple, Yunqi, to death and the evil infant to awaken in this world. And yet you had the galls to lie to the entire world and claim that he had died at the evil infant's hands." Every word she uttered was fueled by passion and hate, and the hand she using to grip the Snow Princess sword was shaking like a leaf. It was clear from the erratic light flickering across the body of the sword that she was nearing the end of her control. "You deserve to die 10,000 times over." Xingjukang was speechless. The only reason Xianxia could have figured this out was because she had planted a soul crystal inside Yunqi. However, that didn't stop him from stuttering through his purple lips in disbelief. "You want to kill me because Yunqi, an insignificant disciple of the Snow Song realm, perished in my hands." Xianxia gritted her teeth a little tighter. Insignificant disciple of the Snow Song realm? True. Maybe he really is a lowly, humble, and young, profound practitioner to you god emperors, and no matter how outstanding he turned out to be, he will always be insignificant in your eyes. But did you know? Did you know? At this point, her aura had completely fallen, and her voice was shaking so much that she wasn't able to say anything else. Instead, she stabbed the star god emperor again in the dantian, her hatred barely subdued under great effort. No blood flowed out of Xingjukang's body because of the Snow Princess sword's freezing properties. The god emperor himself felt no pain either. "Star god emperor, these 3 words are probably the most important thing in your life, aren't they?" Her chest heaved heavily as she spoke. "You destroyed Yunqi, the most important person in my life, and so I will destroy your god emperor power in return and let you know what pain truly means." The star god emperor was still shaking, but he let out a low, twisted chuckle when he heard her preposterous claim. "You destroy my god emperor power?" But the Snow Princess sword suddenly bloomed like an exploding blue star just as he finished speaking, causing the star god emperor's expression to drastically change. His nerves should have been completely numb and frozen, but he still could sense clearly countless needles stabbing into his profound veins and tearing his divinely protected profound veins into bits again and again. Worse, his remaining spiritual senses informed him that the power that was destroying his profound veins was almost as strong as when he was at his full strength. Logically speaking, there was no way the power of a mid-stage divine master could destroy his profound veins, even in his current state. It was because they were normally protected by the star god origin energy. However, the power invading his profound veins was at a level that he hadn't anticipated even in his dreams. The star god emperor started twisting and tossing madly as his face became distorted with 100 times the fear he was experiencing before. "No, no, forgive me. No, I am the star god emperor. No one can do this to me. No, I can promise you anything. No, no, Yua." Bang. There was a loud bang and a chaotic refraction of light, and Xingjukang's profound veins. The profound veins of a god emperor were crushed to bits. They would never recover again for all of eternity. At the same time, bits of starlight floated away from his body. It was the heavenly chief star god's origin power, and after losing its carrier, the energy flew up to the sky and eventually dissipated somewhere. The star god emperor lay on the ground and stared at the heavenly chief starlight that was slowly but surely flying away from him, his eyes filled with gray and despair. His profound veins were ruined. The heavenly chief divine power that had accompanied him for his whole life had scattered. There was nothing more cruel to a profound practitioner than to lose their profound power. However, the lost one's profound veins was even worse than that. Xingjukang, once upon a time, he was a god emperor of the eastern divine region, but right now, at this moment, he had fallen from the highest peak to the lowest bottom possible. He had become a cripple, an eternal cripple. This was 1,000 times, 10,000 times more cruel than just killing him outright. "Kill me! Kill me!" He stared at the colorless sky and muttered dazedly. His eyes had lost the last bit of their color, leaving behind only gray despair and a suicidal will. "Kill you?" Xianxia uttered coldly. Xingjukang's terrible state still wasn't enough to wipe out the hatred in her heart. "Trust me, I very, very much want to tear you into a million pieces. However, you don't deserve a quick, painless death." Her breathing grew more and more erratic, and her chest looked like it would fall out of her clothes. For perhaps the first time in her life, an unprecedented level of malevolence crept onto her exquisite face as she uttered, "I won't kill you. In fact, I'll make sure that you live a long, long life. We are at the heavenly Netherfrost Lake of the Snow Song Realm, the place Xianxia stayed the longest out of any other. I will freeze you and leave you here so that you may suffer a freezing pain every time you breathe. Your body is that of a god, emperors, so the spirit energy in this place will prevent you from even committing suicide. You will live here, kneel, repent, and atone until the end of time." Crack. After that, Xingjukong was encased in ice in one deafening crack. Inside the block of ice, his eyes looked colorless, and he was frozen in a kneeling position facing toward the heavenly Netherfrost Lake. He would never wake up from this eternal nightmare at another space. The first thing he felt through the blackness was his own consciousness, creeping up to him slowly. Then his bodily senses slowly returned to him as well. However, his body felt like it weighed a ton. Where is this? Is this heaven or hell? Heh, I must be in hell, considering the kind of person I am. An aching numbness soon hit him from every part of his body, and his eyes felt unbelievably heavy. When he tried to open his eyes, the weak ray of light had nearly blinded him. He subconsciously tried to block the light with his eyes, but he wasn't able to lift his unbelievably heavy arms. The only action he had managed with the impulse was a twitch of his fingers. "Ah!" A girl's exclamation suddenly resounded next to his ears. "Benefactor, brother, you're awake, right?" It wasn't a delusion. There really was a girl's voice speaking excitedly, urgently and shakily right beside his ears. He opened his lips and tried to say something, but the only thing that exited his throat was a raspy groan that was barely noticeable. However, it was the groan and the twitching of his fingers that prompted the young girl to shout in joy yet again. She ran off all of a sudden before she suddenly tripped on something hard because she was too hasty to notice. Then her tearful shout seemingly came from a distance. "Father, mother, brother, come quickly. Benefactor brother has woken up, he woke up." He tried very hard to open his eyes. Where was this place? If this was hell, then why could he hear the vivid, true voice of a girl? This couldn't be heaven, could it?